Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, and Iran response. Iran responds to the frivolous allegation that they had something to do with assassination on Trump. Be sure to wipe your feet. You in the House of Revolution. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe. Let everybody know Cut Figures on. We're going to update you on the Trump assassination. We're going to dig into it a little bit more. We're going to get into some international, some geopolitical politics today. But let's hear the Iranian foreign minister respond to those frivolous allegations. But before he speak, remember, the president of Iran and the other foreign minister were mysteriously killed in a plane crash. This guy had to step up to the plate because the president and his predecessor were murdered.
My first question to you is relating to the news that CNN has broken about information that the U.S. government received. The National Security Council then passed on to the Secret Service of a plot, an Iranian plot to assassinate the former President Donald Trump in retaliation for the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the senior Iranian general that happened during the Trump administration. What can you tell us about this?
As you know, the Islamic Republic of Iran, immediately following the assassination of General Soleimani, tried to judicially and legally follow these assassinations at Iranian courts, and at the same time, we have tried to make use of the international judicial and legal procedures in order to prosecute the perpetrators and advisors who helped these assassinations. Accordingly, the Islamic Republic of Iran will make use of all legal potentials inside the country or at the international level in order to bring the perpetrators to the justice.
Let me just be sure I understand what you are saying. Are you categorically denying that Iran had any plans or any element of Iran, the Revolutionary Guard, an Iranian-backed militia, had any plans to try to assassinate Donald Trump?
As I put it very blatantly and openly, I told explicitly that we will resort to legal and judicial procedures and frameworks.
It's a great element there, because the United States saying they legally assassinated General Soleimani, long live Soleimani, the revolutionary. Now the U.S. saying they legally assassinated him. He was a terrorist. No, he wasn't. But he's saying they gonna use all the legal means that they have to bring justice to Trump, Bolton, and Bolton and Pompeo for assassinating Soleimani. So it's some gray area there, because even if they are implying, yes, we do plan on assassinating Trump, well, they saying that's legal, just like y'all assassinated Soleimani. But on this interview, he's not saying that. He's saying, well, we was going through court systems and we was going through the UN. But this interview should not even be happening, because they've been speaking on this for 5 years. They have not been bringing that up lately. They just trying to put this into the viewer mind. It's Iran behind the plot. No,
frameworks at the domestic level and international level in order to bring the perpetrators and military advisors of General Soleimani's assassination to justice.
But that means not violent measures. When you say legal and judicial measures, you are talking about international courts and things like that.
Now, he say legal. Now, if a man say all legal measures, why would you bring up violence? Because the U.S. violently killed Soleimani and called it legal. Now, he want to make sure that they're not using the legal ramifications to be able to use violence, which they really do have every right. It didn't get I wish Trump wouldn't have stepped into that. He absolutely got trapped in this situation, and Iran is not backing down. He's on American TV saying we won't want to arrest Trump, Pompeo, and Bolton for what they did, and we're going to pursue that to the end of the time.
As I told you, we will only resort to Iranian and international legal and judicial procedures. Till now, we have done it, and this is our right, and of course, we will continue it. And
I believe they were going to allow the dude to whack him, say he had ties to shady Iranians, just like they tried to say Lee Harvey Oswald had ties to Russia and Cuba. I believe that's what they was going to do. Because right after it happened, now all of a sudden the Iran stuff is flooded. They already had this prepared.
Americans openly said that they assassinated the senior Iranian military commander. So it is our natural right in order to follow these issues. And those who are accused in this case, they should be brought to justice in a just court.
CNN senior national security analyst Juliette Kayyem joins me now from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Good to have you back with us.
That was a terrorist action.
Thanks for having me.
So we have learned that the U.S. Secret Service ramped up security around Donald Trump in recent weeks in response to intelligence indicating an Iranian plot to kill him. Now, sources say there are no known links to the assassination attempt on Trump Saturday, but that raises even more serious questions about how the shooter was still able to get a clear shot of the former president with all this additional security. What's your response to this?
That's exactly right. I mean, in some ways, this story just makes it worse because knowing that there were additional threats against the former president, though foreign, they did respond to that. So one has to believe that there was a greater security focus.
No. When they activated, they MK Ultra client, this patsy, they was going to use because they warned Trump about Iran out the blue again. They was going to use the cover of Iran with the assassination.
Focus on Donald Trump, even at his rally, and yet the breach and the assassination attempt still occurred. Now, it is true, as you said, that the suspect, that the assassin has no known ties to any foreign intelligence agency. There'll be lots of speculation from all accounts coming out of the FBI and state authorities. This was a sort of loner, isolated 20-year-old with access to lots of guns. We don't quite know his motive, but even though these are two different stories, they sort of converge on the Secret Service in terms of knowing what they knew. How did such a seemingly obvious gap in their security planning remain unchecked?
Yeah, and of course, you and I have talked previously about the bewildering decision not to post a sniper on the roof of the building where that shooter was located. The Secret Service now saying that no one was put on that building because it was dangerously sloped. What do you say to that, given the shooter apparently had no issue with the angle of the roof?
Yeah, I don't even know what dangerously sloped means. I mean, does that mean that they're, that they can't get up there? Obviously, someone got up there who wasn't trained. But it's also like I was saying to myself, what century are we in? I mean, it's the 21st century. They couldn't have drones surveying each of these stuff. You don't have to necessarily put a physical body on it. You just want to make sure that someone else doesn't have access to it. And the sort of openness of the building that he could get access either on the inside or outside and then remain on the rooftop. And it was only members of Donald Trump's, sort of the people who went to his rally. That was the first sort of visuals that then started to alert people that there was a danger on the rooftop. It was nothing that the Secret Service did.
Yeah, they certainly still need to answer many of those serious questions. Of course, meantime,
that's still a lie. Now we found out that they knew an hour before shooting happened. They knew an hour ahead of time that they knew exactly who he was too. A suspicious character. Salute Queen was walking around the premises. They had took pictures of him, but he hadn't done what they needed him to do yet.
We're learning more about the movements of Thomas Crooks before Saturday's shooting at the Trump rally in Butler. New video obtained exclusively by Pittsburgh's Action News 4 appears to show Crooks lurking in the area an hour before he opened fire. A seemingly simple video capturing Saturday's large crowd in Butler, also seemingly capturing a much more sinister moment.
I wanted to pan the crowd because it was a massive crowd. So I was just taking in the moment. So this was before the shooting. Obviously had no idea how that day would end.
Let's walk you through this video you'll see only on 4. The man who captured it all, not wanting to show his face on camera. He says he was trying to capture the crowd and take it all in. But if you take a closer look, you'll notice someone in the background. The timestamp is 5:06, and the video appears to show 20-year-old Thomas Crooks lurking near a building just past the secure parameters of the event itself. As the video pans to the crowd, you'll notice law enforcement vehicles stationed in the area as well. As the camera moves back towards the building, Crooks appears to be seen again. Blink and you may miss it, but it likely shows Crooks was in the area for more than an hour before the shots were fired.
When I saw the video last night, when I was going back through my video clips and saw him, I was chilled to the point where I couldn't fall asleep right away, and I didn't sleep
walk around
well.
back there by himself.
There's something really went wrong with this.
Law enforcement sources say Crooks was able to access the roof by climbing over an air conditioning unit adjacent to the building. Pittsburgh's Action News 4 has learned from multiple sources that Thomas Crooks was spotted at the rally, photographed as suspicious, and officers were actively looking for him when he made his way onto the roof and fired at former President Donald Trump. And again, federal officials tell us their investigation is ongoing. I'm Lily Coleman, Pittsburgh's Action News 4.
Every day is more BS. Now you're telling us an hour beforehand he's just wandering back there in a secure area by himself with a cop car back there. He's alone. The people seen him with a rangefinder. The Secret Service was already warned about him. The local police were already warned about him. Now they're telling us an hour in advance they have been looking for him. Oh, really?
Tonight about the man who shot former President Donald Trump. Our sister station in Pittsburgh has exclusively confirmed Thomas Crooks was spotted hanging around the building where he climbed to the roof more than 1 hour before the gunfire. WPXI also reports through sources there were no police or sniper teams inside that building. That's a direct contradiction to comments from the Secret Service director.
The Secret Service is saying the local police told them their snipers were in that building. That's why they were worried about the building. Now the local police, who looks like they were in on this also, is saying that's a lie. We didn't tell the Secret Service that. Now it's a blame game beginning.
WPXI also confirmed Crooks was on the building's roof where he shot at Trump less than 7 minutes before a police officer confronted him. Here's Nicole Ford.
Tonight, we're getting the first images of what police found on Thomas Crooks after a Secret Service sniper shot and killed him: a remote detonator and cell phone. Sources telling me that Crooks was spotted looking at that cell phone and a rangefinder when this photo was captured nearly an hour before shots were fired.
Now, revolutionary salute. Now, ain't it fishy? Ain't it fishy? Somebody decided to take this picture of him a whole hour before. Why? So he can be identified later. So it'll be no question that's him. How do we know? Oh, somebody got this picture of him right here. You know, and he got a rangefinder. You know, he has a remote detonator on him. But they're saying, who taught him how to make bombs? You know, encrypted cell phone on him. Who gave him an encrypted cell phone?
Fired. That picture and his description were communicated on police radio to the tactical command post just after 5:30. All this happening outside the AGR building, but sources tell us local law enforcement was never stationed in the building Crooks climbed, but an adjacent building seen here. Buildings that Butler Township Manager Tom Knight says were identified as a point of interest by planning authorities, not on the local level.
So the building was outside the event area, and there was conversations about the
these Pennsylvania
logistical
cops look real dirty.
coverage of the building, what the building had for access points and what access points needed to be controlled.
As we exclusively reported on Monday, another message was sent to command about 15 minutes before the former president got on stage. Sources telling us the last sighting of Crooks, he had a backpack, but no sign of a gun.
That there was
before president even hit the stage, the Secret Service knew is an individual with a rangefinder. All of them knew what a rangefinder was. They're trying to get the precise targeting on, trying to get a precise coordinates on the target. They saw him with that. They told the Secret Service. Then they lost him. So they don't know where the suspicious, and they had already updated to threat. They don't. So they're telling us they don't know where the threat was, and they still told Trump it's okay to go on stage.
Was a radio transmission indicating that there was a suspicious individual on the rooftop. Was my understanding was our officers' first notification to begin moving towards that building.
According to our sources, Crooks was still on the ground when Trump took the stage, and the Butler Township officers arrived to the AGR building as Trump moved to the podium.
Two of the officers went to what appeared to be the lowest point.
Now, the senators, they had a meeting with the Secret Service, head of Secret Service today. They just had a meeting with her. They demanded that she immediately step down now. They demanded she immediately step down now because all of the BS, they knew a whole hour. And they knew now they're telling us they called him a suspicious threat. They knew they did not know where he was at. They was never supposed to let the man go on to that stage unless they wanted the man to take those goddamn shots. Then they're going to blame it on Iran. They just pissed that the man didn't finish the job.
From ground to roof.
They already had
one of the officers actually
the whole story
boosted the second officer up high enough for him to grab hold of the roof. He did in fact see an individual on the roof with a weapon.
Knight says Crooks pointed the rifle at the officer as the officer hung onto the side of the roof, unable to reach his radio or weapon.
Lost his own grip, right?
Now,
Fell.
I told you, I'm asking or demanding that it shows their body cam. If you're going to confront a suspect who's allegedly on a roof with a gun, and this the president is in the area, you telling me they don't hit the body cam? I done seen them hit the body cam if a Snicker bar is stolen at a grocery store. Is you still a pint of Jack Daniels out the liquor store? They hit the body cam, they confront you. You're telling me this officer, show us the officer being boosted onto the roof with his body cam. Then we can believe him. Show us the commotion, him falling down. Then we can believe him. Without that body cam, this is all a lie. No officer confronted this dude. We still haven't seen him. Where's the citizens? Remember, the citizens is around that building recording. Why didn't they record this officer confronting this dude or falling off the building?
Fell approximately 8 feet to the ground.
Not long after, those shots were fired at the stage. Crooks was killed, and the phone and transmitter were found next to him.
Phone and transmitter. You see that? Secret Service. That's a CIA device right there. It probably was going to blow. I was going to blow his ass up. He wasn't going to leave there.
Into the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and the questions about the security breach. Our Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas is in Washington for us. Good morning to you, Pierre.
Robin, good morning. The young killer at the center of this investigation remains an enigma. The FBI is still working to find the reason for the attack, but police have recovered a mountain of evidence showing
he remains an enigma. See, that's what they want, a black hole. There's nothing known about him. Nothing. Sure, please. Yeah, they know everything about him.
Fascination with guns and explosives. This morning, new details about the final stage of planning from Thomas Matthew Crooks in the hours before he tried to assassinate former President Trump.
Take a look at what happened.
Sources telling ABC News that police suspect Crooks got on the roof not by using the 5-foot ladder he may have recently purchased, but by climbing on top of an air conditioning unit. And was Crooks on a suicide mission? Sources telling ABC News he left his tactical vest in his vehicle, raising questions about whether he intended to survive the attack. And ABC News discovering new details suggesting Crooks was meticulous in designing several suspicious devices found in his vehicle and residence. The devices had a remote control aspect, intricate wiring, and chemicals, though it remains unclear how effective or dangerous they may be.
The real question here is going to
So he
be,
made all that
how
by
did he
himself.
plan all this to the degree that we think he did? The odd man out here is the explosives. As to what was he going to do with those?
This comes amid new questions about security failure.
What was he going to do with those projectors? They trying to project your thinking into you. It's not what was he going to do with it. Who helped him make it? He's 20 years old. What? Y'all ever told us he have a background in making bombs, chemical weapons? That's a chemical weapon, a chemical explosive. Come on, man. That's a conspiracy. Who helped him make it?
Failures that ended up with Trump and 3 others hit by gunfire. Officials tell ABC News the Secret Service has actually stepped up security around Trump in recent weeks in response to threats from Iran to assassinate him. But despite that, Crooks was able to climb onto a roof and fire at Trump from 400 feet away. Officials say there's no indication of a link between the Iran threats and Saturday's attempted assassination, but now growing outrage about the security lapse.
Someone's on top of the roof. Look.
Video shows Crooks on the roof moments before he opened fire, spotted by bystanders who called police for help.
Officer.
In our interview, the head of the Secret Service, Kim Cheadle, saying law enforcement officers were stationed inside the same building. Trump's would-be assassin climbed onto the roof and opened fire.
Now, the head of she should step down for that. The head of the Secret Service is saying, oh, the local police, they was inside of there. They was set up. The local police came out there and say, that is a lie. No, we were not. We were in an adjacent building. Y'all were responsible for that, not us.
Was local police in that building. There was local police in the area that were responsible for the outer perimeter of the building. I'm being told that the shooter was actually identified as a potential person of suspicion. And so the local police department actually put a call out.
Officers responded, but were not able to stop the gunman in time. The local sheriff defending his team, telling ABC News each department had been given specific assignments and they carried them out.
The deputies under my control did their job and went above and beyond after the shooting stopped and the chaos began.
In fairness, nobody wanted something like this to happen, and many of the police performed heroically. But the fact remains, we still do not have a clear answer as to why and how that young killer was able to get on that roof and fire away, George.
In fairness, nobody wanted, hey, brother, you don't know what the hell nobody wanted. See, there you go. You just a reporter, man. Don't tell us your personal opinion. Don't tell us your personal opinion, brother. Put that on your Instagram account or tweet that to us. Don't say it on the news, brother. You don't know what the hell somebody wants.
Forehead between Thomas Matthew. Another day, another video where things just do not add up when it comes to this whole Trump rally incident, when it comes to the suspect being Thomas Matthew Crooks. So what I am going to do is play this video right here and make sure you listen very closely. This man that this news channel is interviewing, his home is where Thomas Matthew Crooks parked his van in front of before Thomas Crooks went off into the Trump rally to cause that incident. I am going to play the video right now. So again, make sure you listen very closely.
Hey, Martha. Sorry, I didn't know if you were talking to me. I couldn't tell yet. But okay, I'm going to talk to him right now. I'm going to bring him in. This is Billy Toma, Martha, who we've been talking to. We actually met him out there at the scene yesterday. He lives right near where this all happened at that rally. And you also recorded some video. As we see now, the suspect's van was parked right in your street. And they all kind of had it closed off, Martha, because they didn't want people from the rally to park on your street. So then you knew this guy's car wasn't supposed to be there. Walk me through what you saw.
So I came home a little bit before 5. Saw a park there. Didn't really think too much of it. It was the only spot in the whole yard or the whole road that wasn't blocked off. So later on in the night, everything happened and we got home and we were sitting there and saw cops all lined on the street. So whenever we looked out, we walked outside and saw them opening up his vehicle and everything. When the cop opened it, everybody else jumped back and was trying to stay out of the way. Here I am worried about it blowing up or whatever's going on. So,
I mean, to find out that this happens and the former president gets shot nearly right in the head, almost assassinated across the street from your house, and then to find out that the gunman's car was possibly parked right in front of your house. How many cops are we talking about that were out there surrounding this van? And was there a license plate on the back of that van?
There was probably 5 to 10 cars out there, and there was an Arizona plate on the van. And there was probably 15 cops
You heard the
altogether,
homeowner
all
say he has
outside
on
of the
camera
van.
police
And
arriving
then,
to the scene.
like I said, whenever
They
the one
opened up this
opened
white
up the
van,
door,
they
the rest of them all jumped
because
back,
more
trying
than
to stay out of the
likely,
way.
This white van has explosives in it. They say this white van belongs to Thomas Matthew Crooks. The only problem is Thomas Matthew Crooks owns and drives a white Hyundai Sonata. News ran articles saying prior to Thomas Matthew Crooks supposedly attending this Trump rally, he was seen driving around different towns in Pittsburgh, going to different stores in his white Hyundai Sonata. So now you can no longer find any current news articles talking about this white van. It's now they have found explosives inside Thomas Matthew Crooks' car. So then what happened to the videos and the news stories of this white van with Arizona license plates? I would love to see the video footage that this homeowner had taken of Thomas Matthew Crooks' van, because he says something rather important. He says the van's license plate had Arizona license plates. Thomas Matthew Crooks, of course, is not from Arizona. He lived with his parents in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Did he swap out license plates with another car before he conducted this mission? He had to have known this was an end-of-life mission, that he was not coming back from this. And if he did indeed swap license plates with another car, then why isn't that individual speaking out that their license plates had changed? So now we have a van with all these explosives in it that they are saying belongs to Thomas Matthew Crooks, yet the license plate of the van belongs to a state that Thomas Matthew Crooks does not reside in. Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, where Thomas Matthew Crooks had resided with his parents, is a suburb within the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. So it's a suburb within Pittsburgh. Now that's going to be very important. If this van does not connect to Thomas Matthew Crooks by state, I then wondered if this van could connect to another man who I believe is the one responsible for what took place at Trump's rally. So I was searching news articles that had contained Maxwell Yerick's name. I found this one news article from WTAE, which shows Maxwell Yerick's photo along with another accomplice. This article goes all the way back to April 11th, 2017. The title of this article happens to be Pittsburgh Trump Protesters Sentenced to Jail Time. While this article was updated in 2017 to reflect Maxwell Yerick's sentencing along with his accomplice, this incident involving Maxwell Yerick took place in 2016 while Trump was rallying in Pittsburgh. While he was giving a speech in Pittsburgh, Maxwell Yerick started to assault the crowd. He was protesting Trump, and then he was arrested. Trump was just a candidate running for president in 2016 when he was giving this speech in Pittsburgh. Maxwell Yerick has a history of violence when it comes to Trump's Pittsburgh rallies. Well, it's very easy for Maxwell Yerick to attend these Pittsburgh rallies because Maxwell Yerick lived in Perry South, Pittsburgh. Bethel Park, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Thomas Matthew Crooks is from, and Perry South, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Maxwell Yerick is from, both belong in the same county, Allegheny County.
Salute, Queen. Now, ain't that something? These boys from the same exact county, man. One dude was locked up for attacking people at a Trump rally in Pittsburgh a few years ago, who some people, who the news identified as the shooter at first, who's allegedly missing, and then this Crooks fellow.
Isn't that just such a weird coincidence? Now, I do want to say, because I do have to say, that this video is for entertainment purposes only. When I say Maxwell Yerick is the suspect, I am only saying he is the suspect behind this incident at Trump's rally. As of right now, there is no concrete proof that Maxwell Yerick attended this rally. There is no concrete proof that Maxwell Yerick had done anything wrong on July 13th, 2024. The only reason why I am using Maxwell Yerick's name is because this is the name originally given. This is the photo originally given by news and media before investigators accidentally slipped up and they said they collected DNA at the scene, and what returned almost instantly was Thomas Matthew Crooks' DNA. So if they go back now and say, oops, we slipped up, it was actually Maxwell Yerick who was at the scene, then who was Thomas Matthew Crooks? Where did you get that DNA from? Well, Thomas Matthew Crooks, like I had said, was going to be used in another agenda. I do believe still that October surprise, that school pow-pow surprise, because again, Thomas Matthew Crooks' MO connects to somebody who would do a school pow-pow. Maxwell Yerrick's MO connects to somebody who would take their anger out on Trump because he already has that history. Wouldn't it make more sense that Thomas Matthew Crooks would take out a school, given the fact he was bullied and made fun of, had no friends, he was a loner? He would take his revenge out on that school and people connected to that school, teachers like we have previously seen in these other school pow-pow events, as opposed to taking his revenge out on Donald Trump, given the fact that people who have spoke out on Thomas Matthew Crooks' behalf has stated Thomas Matthew Crooks was a staunch conservative. Not only that, his family had signs of Trump outside their home. So I'll tell you what I think happened. I strongly believe that these two men were patsies. Two agendas had accidentally crossed paths, and now there is no going back. Now they quickly have to build a narrative for Thomas Matthew Crooks. If a school pow-pow event does indeed still happen in October, remember who the original suspect was meant to be. They were building up Maxwell Yerrick to be the fall guy of what took place on July 13th. His history is there. He has a violent history when it comes to Trump's Pittsburgh rallies. And again, I am not saying that's Maxwell Yerrick on the roof, but what I am saying, it strongly looks like Maxwell Yerrick prone on the roof. That does not look like Thomas Matthew Crooks. The forehead between Thomas Matthew Crooks and whoever that is prone on the roof is different. So somebody fumbled the bag big time when it came to this agenda. They are just getting sloppier and sloppier and sloppier. What scares me is that they are getting so sloppy, it looks like they don't even care anymore. Yes, they were sloppy when it came to 9/11, but they were able to achieve everything they set out to achieve. They were sloppy when it came to the C-19, but when it comes to this event right here, they were extra sloppy. Like I said, it looked like they did not even care to cover up anything properly. So now they are saying before Thomas Matthew Crooks attended this rally and caused this incident at this rally, Thomas Crooks made a few stops. He made a series of stops in and around Pittsburgh. He went to a shooting range where he was a member and practiced firing, a law enforcement official told CNN. The next morning, Crooks went to a Home Depot where he bought a 5-foot ladder and a gun store where he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition. So my question is, do any of these locations, does Home Depot, does this ammunition store, does this shooting range have any video footage of Thomas Matthew Crooks doing any of these said things? This article also says that Thomas Crooks was driving around in his car, a Hyundai Sonata. Then what was that van parked in front of that home with all those explosives in it? Like I said, they were super sloppy when it came to this story. Nothing makes sense whatsoever. The only thing that does make sense is that agendas were crossed. One agenda, one man was accidentally the suspect of another agenda. And now they can no longer use Thomas Matthew Crooks. So I wonder what has become of Thomas Matthew Crooks. How big is the coincidence that we have two men from the same county, only 30 minutes apart, both name dropped as the suspect behind this incident at Trump's rally? The one man they did confirm that they had the DNA of, his background does not match what took place on July 13th. But the other man, whose social media has been oddly white, his background matches. The more I dig, the deeper I go. I am just finding Triceratops poop. Nothing here makes sense, and everything stinks. But in any case, thank you.
Hey there, friends. More updates from the ever-changing story of the Trump assassination. This video here kind of clears up a couple things. We actually have a little bit more clarity
although it doesn't answer any questions, it does define a couple of little things that were question marks out there. Take a look.
Those local counter snipers from 2 different local SWAT teams were positioned in the area of the AGR building, but not in the building that Crooks fired from, according to our sources. And tonight, we're learning that 3 separate local SWAT teams, along with state police, were all part of a Saturday morning briefing about the rally. Tonight, we're getting the first images of what police found on Thomas Crooks after a Secret Service sniper shot and killed him: a remote detonator and cell phone. Sources telling me that Crooks was spotted looking at that cell phone and a rangefinder when this photo was captured nearly an hour before shots were fired. That picture and his description were communicated on police radio to the tactical command post just after 5:30. All this happening outside the AGR building, but sources tell us local law enforcement was never stationed in the building Crooks climbed, but an adjacent building seen here. Buildings that Butler Township Manager Tom Knight says were identified as a point of interest by planning authorities, not on the local level.
So the building was outside the event area, and there was conversations about the logistical coverage of the building, what the building had for access points and what access points needed to be controlled.
As we exclusively reported on Monday, another message was sent to command about 15 minutes before the former president got on stage. Sources telling us the last sighting of Crooks, he had a backpack, but no sign of a gun.
That there was a radio transmission indicating that there was a suspicious individual on the rooftop. Was my understanding was our officers' first notification to begin moving towards that building.
According to our sources, Crooks was still on the ground when Trump took the stage, and the Butler Township officers arrived to the AGR building as Trump moved to the podium.
2 of the officers went to what appeared to be the lowest point from ground to roof. One of the officers actually boosted.
They walked him right out there.
The second officer up high enough for him to grab hold of the roof. He did, in fact, see an individual on the roof with a weapon.
Knight says Crooks pointed the rifle at the officer as the officer hung onto the side of the roof, unable to reach his radio or weapon.
Lost his own grip, right? Fell approximately 8 feet to the ground.
Not long after, those shots were fired at the stage. Crooks was killed, and the phone and transmitter were found next to him. Now, the big question tonight is who was running that tactical police line of communication. As we reported from our sources, local SWAT officers were reporting all of this information up the chain of command. I questioned state police today on their role of communication. I'm told that they're not allowed to comment on operational security or planning.
So the counter snipers that we thought were in the building where the actual shooter was, we had a lot of comments where people said, if he's walking on a metal building, how come nobody inside heard him? Well, guess what? The Secret Service director is the one who said those counter snipers were in the building the shooter was in. She said that. She's going to say she got bad information, whatever. It's clear that she's not equipped for her job. She can't even get something that simple right, which is a pretty big deal. Well, the reason why is because they were not in that building. So now you're telling me, see, she was trying to save face by saying, oh, the building, because if it's
I believe local law enforcement told them that they had this building secure. I believe they did tell the Secret Service that local law enforcement was in on it. Also, like I told you the first couple of days, the sniper, they did see the dude sitting on the building. He was looking at the dude on the building, but because local law enforcement said this is their building, that's what froze them. You know, that could be all of their cover story, but that's where shit got messed up. Local law enforcement said they had that building under control. She might be telling the truth about that.
massive slope was too dangerous for us to be on it. So we secured the building from inside. Remember that? That was her excuse. So now they didn't even have that. So that building was not secured, right? This clarification now, they have stated locally that she was wrong. The building next to it, further away from the Trump rally, is where those people were inside. So this shooter was able to climb up on top of the most valuable piece of real estate for an assassin in the state of Pennsylvania, and nobody was inside it. We know the massive slope thing was a lie. We know they were just pulling stuff out of their butt to try to save face, right? So we listened to them say that the slope was too dangerous, but we all knew it was BS. Everybody knew that was BS. Stevie Wonder called that one. But now they're saying we knew that building was a threat. We couldn't secure it from on top because it was too dangerous, so we secured it from inside. Now that's not even true. They did not secure it at all. It was not secure at all. Why wouldn't you have people stationed all around that building? I mean, we saw the video yesterday where a lot of the state troopers and other folks were just standing around watching, bashing a car into a fence. How come those guys didn't surround that one building? If it was too dangerous to get on top, which again, I'm being sarcastic, I know. Guys, I've seen wheelchairs roll up more aggressive slopes than that. So we know that was a story. But nevertheless, oh, it's too dangerous. Circle the building with these guys that were just hanging out, right? Keep somebody from getting up on that massively sloped rooftop. There's your problem solved. You don't have to put them in it or on it. Put them around it. Common sense stuff. But one of my other questions is the remote detonator. Not a lot of people are talking about this remote detonator. They claim that not only did he have this remote detonator that was tied to explosives in his car, and I think they found explosives at his home too, but for sure in his car. That kind of debunks the whole story of walking somewhere with the ladder and all that stuff, right? So it seems as though he drove there because they claim he had explosives in his car. So maybe the explosives were down the road. They haven't been clear about where the vehicle is at this point. My point in bringing up the remote detonator and the explosives in the vehicle is, remember, it took them a day or two before they gained access to this shooter's cell phone, right? They went through his cell phone, and guess what they did not find? They haven't found any history, any search history that has anything to do with explosives. Now, they haven't said the other things that they may have found, but they did come out and say that there was no search history that involved explosives. So how did he make a working bomb that they've come out and said was a legitimate explosive device?
And that's
how did he do that? That's not like baking a cake where it has instructions on the side. It's not like boiling water or making toast. It's not a common sense thing. Oh, this must be how you do it. You have to have some type of, let's not call it formal training.
You got to have instructions, and you can't even go to the local library and check books out because the FBI check that too. You can't even go to the local library and check those type of books out to put together weapons, bomb making material. Yes, the government do check with local libraries for any suspects doing that type of bullshit.
Training, but some type of training to know that A plus B equals whatever you want it to be, right? If he had no search history whatsoever, who made the bomb? Honest question. Who made the bomb? Who made this detonator, this remote detonator tied to that bomb or explosive device, whatever you want to call it? Who made this stuff? Who put this together for him? I'd like to know the answer. I think that's a fair question. And they go on to state the rumor that we kind of have been hearing, that an officer did try to climb up after people said that there was somebody on the roof, and that this shooter pointed a gun at him and he climbed back down. Well, they explained it pretty good. Now, it made me feel good to hear this from this gentleman, that did in fact happen, and he was very descriptive of how that happened. However, when he climbed down, he radioed somebody. Where'd that radio transmission go? They claim that when Trump was on stage, this guy was still on the ground. So he quickly, apparently, got up on that roof really fast. If they saw this guy on the roof and Trump was on the stage and they radioed, that transmission stopped somewhere. What I mean by that is the people at the stage, the Secret Service, even whether it's the Betty Crocker chick or whoever else, they've got earpieces. They could have immediately been told. Maybe they didn't have time to get him off the stage, but they could have immediately been told, get him down. those podiums that you see, those are armored podiums. That's not made out of balsa wood or fabricated wood. That's bulletproof panels. They could have had Trump immediately get down. They could have covered him. They could have kept him from getting shot, and maybe it would have kept the shooter from shooting and killing the 50-year-old man and shooting the other two people as well, because his target would have been out of his line of sight at that point. Again, where did that radio communication go and where did it stop? Because it stopped somewhere. It did not make it to where it was supposed to go. Whoever was radioing that there was a guy up there with a gun that just aimed it at me meant that to go somewhere to prevent what everybody was there for, which is to protect one guy on that stage. And it did not go there. On a related note, they have come out and said that the parents that day also called and reported their son missing. His parents were looking for him on Saturday in the hours leading up to the Trump rally shooting and eventually called law enforcement to indicate he was missing, and they were worried. It's unclear what his parents told authorities, but the call happened on Saturday before crooks later opened fire at Trump during the rally. I've got a little bit more on the parents too. There's some hit pieces that people are trying to put out on the parents and actually on Trump, saying that he's somehow another tied to some kind of gun registry, which is false and fake. I'll put a story out on that tomorrow, but I mainly wanted to let you know that even the parents knew something wasn't right. And believe it or not, my wife made a really good comment that apparently even his parents thought there was something kooky or screwy with their own 20-year-old kid. Because if their son is of sound mind and body and he's 20 years old and you're okay with him normally leaving with a rifle, then why were you worried all of a sudden? What did he say? What did he do? What triggered you into thinking you needed to call authorities?
If your son is kooky and something just not right about your son, why did the father go buy him an assault rifle to begin with? You see, that don't match. No. The father need to be arrested. If you say your son is crazy and you're a danger to the public, why the hell you buying him an assault rifle? Because the father did say he bought him the rifle. He probably made the bombs too.
Jonathan Lee Riches investigates new information, and you have to listen to this. His parents called the police. This is a big deal, folks.
We have just learned that the Trump rally shooter, Thomas Crooks' parents were looking for him in the hours leading up to the shooting. We're now told they eventually called law enforcement to report that Crooks was missing, and they were worried. And they also were told, those parents are now being cooperative now with authorities, but they gave them the heads up that something's going on with our son. We are worried. We don't know the texture or the details of their concerns. So in other words, well, were they worried that he had a gun? Were they worried? What were they worried about? Were they worried that he was going to try to attempt to kill a sitting president and then go ahead and turn into an assassin and kill another person and injure two others? It was an attempted assassination on Trump, but he managed to murder anyway. Are we talking about that? What were they giving the cops a heads up about? This is the first time we are hearing this. We'll stay on the story and we will bring you the details, updates as we get them. Crooks' parents.
They called the parents, folks. And here's I have some questions here. Let me turn this off.
The parents call the police.
Here's the question I have, folks.
I thought it was right after.
Why did the parents call the police? Supposedly, he was supposed to work that day. He worked at a elderly home with the food for the elderly, right, or something in that nature. I don't know the name of the actual
dietitian at a nursing home, I think.
But supposedly he called off work that day. Another thing that's being reported is that he asked to borrow his dad's gun so he could go to the shooting range, because apparently he goes to the shooting range and shoots a lot. But it's the fact that his parents called police saying that he was missing is very, very odd and strange to me and needs to be explained more. One, I would love to hear the police call. I would love to listen in if it was a 911 call, And did the
When
police
West Ball, they
actually
go
dispatch and go out there in time? And did they put an alert out for him? It depends on what was said and what the parents said, because quite possible he's made threats in the past only to his parents, like he was going to do something, some irrational act. And then, maybe his parents is like, oh my God, the gun's gone or something like that. Oh my God, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Or were they?
They had dozens. They had over a dozen weapons collected from that home. So come on, one gun was gone. Get out of here. They knew that boy had that gun. What about the bombs? Was some of the father's explosives gone too?
Looking for him, like he was supposed to go to work, and they were called to work and he wasn't there, or work called home and said, where is he? Or or something. Or was he acting irrational days up to when this tragedy happened? So hopefully we'll get more information, but it does seem like, folks, that the parents are cooperating with law enforcement. And if they did in fact call, then that might work in their favor.
That's fishy. The family is small hats that the news don't want to report on their ethnicity. They trying to blame it. They trying to bring up Iran. That sounds like, who would want the U.S. government to blame Iran for the assassination of Donald Trump? Who will want the U.S. government to go to war with Iran?
Favor, because we've always said there could be others that could be charged, and the parents would probably be one of the people that could get charged with this. Dad providing him the gun, them knowing what he was going to do, and the fact that they call police might shield them from criminal liability. Not so sure civilly, because I do feel like the victims' families are going to actually pursue the family civilly, because they gave the son the gun to go shoot. So I do think they're facing some civil charges, but we don't know a lot of things, still a lot of unknowns, but that is some new information. And hopefully any type of audio calls get released. I mean, were police out there looking for him after the call were made, or did they do it like a missing person? We got to wait a certain amount of time before they can actually declare someone missing. Those are some unanswered questions here. We are covering this case. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button. When more information comes out about this, I will share with all of you. I am JLR Investigates. Stay tuned.
July 17th, 2024. Larry Johnson joins us now. Larry, it's a pleasure no matter what we're talking about. Thank you very much for joining us.
Always at your beck and call.
Thank you, dear friend. You are, of course, a renowned expert on rifles and ballistics. And of course, you have a lot of sources and friends in the government and out. And you've been able to provide us with great information. I do want to start with an apology, and that is we ran an X, what used to be called a tweet, of what the person who created it claimed was him as an officer,
right?
Intended to guard the president, asking for permission to shoot the shooter, and permission denied. And it turns out that that was false and phony. We thought it was real and serious at the time we put it up. It came to me from a source that is credible, but that source was duped. You and I discussed it as if it was real. We apologize. We both acknowledge that it's since been widely debunked and was not real. Nevertheless, there are many, many questions about what happened, how it happened, how the former and likely future president was nearly murdered. Let's start, if we can, with the scenario of how all this came about. Was the shooter at the scene before the president was there? Was he there a day or two before? Do we know of his whereabouts or his preparation, Larry?
I have seen no report that happened, but there's no way that without visiting the site beforehand, that he would have been able to do what he did. There had to be some, he had to go out there before. And also what's noteworthy is he was carrying a rangefinder. You've played golf, and when you're out in the middle of the fairway and you look through the rangefinder telling you how far it is to the yardstick, he was carrying that. So that's another indicator that he was not, a complete novice with these firearms. And let me just correct you on one thing. You say I'm a renowned expert. I just know which end of the gun the bullet comes out of. Okay.
Larry, you're a certified instructor, and you instruct some pretty important people. So to me, you're renowned, but I appreciate your humility. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, my dear friend. Is it true that he was seen by members of the audience who were there to hear the president, who made known their alarm at seeing a human being on a roof with some sort of a black device in his hands? I don't know if they even could determine that it was a rifle.
He was seen multiple times over a 30-minute period. Now, this highlights what was one of probably the biggest breakdowns. And there's a company, it's called Fieldcraft. I know its owner, a good guy named Mike Glover, former SF guy. We had some dealings on another project related to Benghazi more than 10 years ago. So I know Mike, and he's solid. And one of the guys that works for him is just retired from a SWAT team and knows the Secret Service people who were involved with this. And they gave him the real story about what happened. Number one, the Secret Service did not do advance work on those buildings that were out there. They should have. They didn't. Number two goes to your question. They did not have a single point of communications where a police officer that would have been out there witnessing that could call back to the what they call the Tactical Operations Center and say, "Hey, we've got a problem here," and to have a coordinated communications plan. They didn't have that. They didn't have any way of identifying friend or foe. And one of the ways police do that is they have what's called a color of the day. And we've seen this in Ukraine, in the war in Ukraine, both on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, where they put a colored armband on, white or blue and yellow or red or whatever. But everybody who's part of the security apparatus will have a color on, an identifying mark. That way, who's supposed to be there. And then anybody that's not wearing that color is not supposed to be there, and you take action against them.
Did snipers see him and think he might have been one of them?
That's speculation at this point.
Purposely
what
done.
We do know now, according to the buddy at Fieldcraft, there was a second counter sniper team that was located on a roof of the building that was to Trump's left. Now, the picture that everybody has seen of the guys on the sloped roof with the tripod, they are to Trump's right. And I'm saying I'm Donald Trump facing downrange.
Right.
The sniper team that everybody's seen the picture of is up here to his right. These other guys are to the left.
Let me just stop here a second. So,
revolutionary salute to our brother Out Abundance for the $10 donation to the war chest. Revolution is way of life. I appreciate the love, family. Salute to you, brother.
This is from NBC News, which took this photograph and created this graphic.
Right.
The stage where Trump was shot, where we see to the left of that stage the little sort of pinkish square box right at the head of the arrow. Is that
Correct.
where Trump himself was?
Yeah, that's where Trump was. And then you see those three buildings behind, the gray one in the middle, the two white ones. There were two counter sniper teams on each of those white roofed buildings. The one on the left, one on the right. It was the guys on the right that made the shot. The guys on the left, as I went back and looked at the video, you see the guy looks up and then he comes down to a scope and then he jerks the shot. I was always thought, boy, maybe he got lucky. But you look to the guy next to him, he's also sort of scrambling. They thought that they were being shot at. And that is what they've told to some of the, so they were they were actually ducking and covering. But it was the guys on the other side who did it. You know, the other thing that has come out that's so important about this is that Trump's normal Secret Service detail had been pulled off that job because they were tired and they needed a break. And so they brought in basically a new group of people who really hadn't worked with Trump before. They were not as experienced. And was that just an inconvenient decision, or was that something darker? But the reality is the Secret Service personnel who were there.
Reality of the situation now, we know they was never supposed to bring Trump on stage because an hour before he went on stage, they knew they had a suspicious person who had been looking at rangefinder, had been found with a rangefinder. And they took a picture of him, and they was talking to the Secret Service, and they was talking to local police department. They had not found this guy. So when they let Trump on stage, they knew they had a threat that had not been dealt with yet. They cannot explain that.
They're on the ground doing the work. They're not at fault because they, quote, didn't do their job. The fault lies at the administrative decision-making level from the start, where they should have done the proper advance work. Because what they did is they said, well, okay, those buildings out there, we'll let the state or local police handle that, which is what they did. But again, they didn't put in place a plan for communication, that if there was a problem out there, how it would be communicated back to the TOC in a way that once there had been an identified suspicious activity like this, the biggest failure is that the Secret Service agent in charge there on the ground should have said Donald Trump is not going on stage until we resolve this.
That's a fact.
Correct.
Or
now let me ask you some.
That's a fact. And that's why the senators is actually telling her to step down immediately. Why? Because now they know you had an hour in advance knowledge that a threat was on the scene. You took a picture of him. You did not relocate him, and you still let Trump go out there. Come on, man. Y'all led that man to what they thought was going to be a slaughter. And all of this other shit they already had lined up. The Iranian piece. It's just been too much political violence. All this is a script they was gonna roll out, and they was gonna blame Trump for his own assassination, saying he killed Soleimani, saying he had been reckless promoting violence. Come on, they was gonna blame this man for getting shot.
Rather basic questions, only because the viewing audience might not know this. So we have a variety of level of law enforcement there. We have Secret Service. We have Pennsylvania State Police. Within the Secret Service, there's a number of different levels. There's snipers and there's plainclothes.
Right.
And then we have local police.
Right.
Who is in charge? It's got to be the Secret Service.
Sure. No, the Secret Service. They should be in charge.
Now, remember, 50-something U.S. government agencies said Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. Chuck Schumer came out and said those Secret Service, those U.S. intelligence agencies, they had 100 ways from Sunday they was going to screw over Trump because they was pissed at him. Schumer said that. Those agencies. Now, all these agencies are the one who's supposed to investigate what happened to Trump. Now, none of these agencies, they're going to protect Trump when they the ones said they was going to screw over him and then tried to brainwash the people into believing he was a Russian asset and a traitor. Come on, don't forget the FBI director had to step down. They coordinated with Hillary Clinton. They said from day one they would never allow him to be allow him to get anything done in the U.S. government. They said that because he was an outsider. They said that.
So the failure to communicate, the failure of some snipers to say that guy looks like one of us, but I know he's not. That's the Secret Service's failure for failing to identify to the state police and local snipers who the snipers were and where they were located. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah. Because apparently there was no integrated, unified communication system, so that the problems that they were identifying out there on that perimeter were immediately conveyed to let's call him the site commander, the Secret Service agent in charge of the overall operation. You know, it would have been his call. Say, hey, stand down. The president's not going on stage. That didn't happen.
Like 9/11. once one of these agencies got a win that it was any threat, then they open up the door to allow it to happen, and then to roll out they game plan after it, to just stand. All they got to do is just stand down and let the plot unroll.
And that should have happened. And now we've had videos posted that show clearly they had at least 90 seconds warning that there was a problem. And one of only two possibilities. Either the information did not get communicated, which was because there was no communication system in place to make it happen.
Yes, it did.
Or it got communicated and there was a decision-making failure.
There was never a decision-making failure. Remember, the head of the Secret Service decided to send Trump on stage. They knew an hour in ahead that it's a threat. They took a picture of the guy. The police took a picture of the guy. Hey, we're looking for this guy right here. We haven't seen him. He had a rangefinder looking through the scope towards the stage. They knew what that man. Come on. And they say, okay, it's like sending the lamb out there to the slaughter. They knew exactly, like they told Kennedy to ride with their top down. They knew exactly what was going on.
This was a failure across the board. And it was not so much a failure of the personnel on the ground, the average Secret Service agent. It was a failure of leadership. It was a failure of the person who is in charge of that overall operation. But more importantly, it goes back as a failure in Washington, D.C. to not
talk to me about
fail was the hit. That's
what is zero in on your expertise. Issues with a scope.
Yeah,
I know from my own experience, which is a mere fraction of yours, that looking through a scope is like looking through a straw. Your field of vision is heightened, it's magnified, but it's radically diminished from what you would see with your naked eye. Am I right?
Yeah, no, you're correct, and that was the problem for the counter sniper team. That once you identify a target, then if you can take your eye off and you've got to come back, you got to make sure that you do not move the scope at all, because just a minor movement will eliminate the target. But what we do know is the shooter was not using a scope. He was using, it has now been identified as an EOTech optic. I think I tried to email you guys a copy of that. What it is it's not magnified, and it has a round in the glass. You're looking through a glass, but in the middle of it there'll be a round reticle, like a green circle or a red circle. And there are ways that can be adjusted up and down, right or left.
Is this a device that you attach to the weapon?
Yeah, it's attached. It sits right on top of the rifle rail. There's a picture of it. So that's what the shooter would look through. And if you look carefully right in the middle of that, you can faintly see the circle that's in the middle of that screen.
So that's what he would have painted. I'm using a term maybe improperly. He would have placed that red circle on Donald Trump's head.
Yes.
And then he would have squeezed the trigger.
Okay, that's a bigger problem. The Secret Service, they didn't notice a red dot appearing on the president's neck, ears.
Correct. And so it's not magnified. So depending on the quality of his, look, the kid wore glasses. So it's not like he wasn't like some eagle-eyed person with impeccable vision. So whenever you're trying to look at something at 150 yards out, including through a glass without magnification, sometimes it's difficult to see a target. I know just with shooting with iron sights, I can easily line up a shot at 10 yards.
How many shots did he get off?
I heard 3 or 4. Some have said 8. I don't believe there were 8, because just in terms of what was recorded, you didn't hear 8 shots, and a number of the shots that we hear were fired by the Secret Service, not by him. But he at least had 3. It may have been a few more, but once that first shot went off, then his subsequent shots were wild, and they hit other people in the crowd, as we know.
Right. We're going to put up the weapon. Now, this is not the very weapon used
but it's like it's a
okay,
model.
this is the type of weapon, and this image is from the manufacturer. Am I right, Larry?
Correct.
They let
Yeah,
the kid walk around
DPMS,
like that.
Panther Arms, which I understand is now owned by Palmetto State Armory. So this is just the conventional, what they call an AR platform. AR doesn't stand for automatic rifle; it's Armalite. But this was the type of weapon that was developed in the 1960s by a guy named Eugene Stoner, and so it was used in Vietnam. That's where it really sort of came into prominence. It's that magazine that's attached. It holds 30 rounds, and it shoots a cartridge that's a 5.56. And I
Can
can
you
show
do you have with you
yeah.
a cartridge?
Yeah, so that's a 5.56. So you look at it, it's a little over 2.5 inches long. The bullet size is, you can see, it's not, it's not real big. Compare that. That's the type of bullet. The bullet's this part, the shell casings, the other.
Right. So that's what the shooter used.
Yeah, that's what the shooter used when whizzing by Donald Trump's head, hit his ear.
Still looking like that.
This is the kind of round. This is a 308. The snipers would have used a 308 or a 300, what they call a 300 Win Mag. Again, roughly the same size, but you can see the difference in size.
All right. So the larger one is what the
counter
state
snipers
police and the Secret Service snipers used to kill him. Without getting too graphic, how was he killed? Where did they hit him? In his head?
Yeah, they hit him in the head.
So he died instantaneously, and obviously stopped shooting at that point.
Yeah, and when you listen to the recording, I mean, it's unlike a Hollywood gunfight that goes on for minutes. This was done within 5 seconds. So I mean, from the time he started shooting to the time the counter sniper team responded, it was 5-6 seconds max.
If the sniper team had seen him on the roof with the weapon before he fired it, what should they have done? Called command and control or take him out?
It depends on the rules of engagement. I mean, you decide ahead of time that if it was me, I would have said we were going to establish a perimeter. We're going to know who's friend, who's foe. We'll be able to easily identify them if they don't have that on, the armband on, the right color. And so if you see somebody in that perimeter with a gun, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to keep the president off the stage and secure, see if that individual can be secured, and otherwise, shoot them. But they had some options where they didn't have to shoot him first. As long as they removed Trump from the scene, that's what they're there for, to protect Donald Trump. And look, the job of a Secret Service agent is the worst job in the world. You're a bullet catcher. That's what you're there for.
Right.
And so you got to admire the courage of those men who did rush the stage, and the woman, where they knew they had no knowledge of whether or not that shooting was going to continue, and so they could have easily been shot themselves.
Well, they basically tackled him to get him down, and then put their own bodies on him until they were told the shooter is
not
down,
right?
And then they removed him from the scene. Do I have that correct?
Correct. Yeah, they call it body bunkering. So and there's been some criticism of them that because under standard procedure is you keep Donald Trump down, and if he wants to put his shoes on too bad, you can buy him. He's rich enough; he can buy some new shoes. Keep him down, keep him covered until you get him into a secure place. But Trump being Trump, man, popped up, and to his credit, he wasn't. Some people might have been emotionally scarred and crying and frightened and hunkered down. He stood up and put his hand up and yelled, "Fight, fight, fight!" And some have criticized the agents for that was a break in protocol. If you were going through Secret Service training and your protectee was allowed to do that, you'd probably get a black mark and maybe not pass the qualification. But this was real life, and it is what it is.
Is there any evidence of complicity on the part of anybody else with the shooter?
Not yet. I personally, I don't think he acted alone. I think
Why
he
do
had
you
some
think he
support.
did not act alone, Larry?
Being able to identify the site from where he would be able to carry out the shooting, that implies that there had to be some prior surveillance. If you will, the encouragement to do this, because at the timing of this, Judge, this is the other thing we have to look at. We've got a number of, we can call them coincidences. So coincidence number one, they decide that Trump's regular Secret Service team shouldn't be on scene, so they're going to put in a completely new team. And the guy in charge has been described as relatively inexperienced, which it was demonstrated by how the scene was managed that day. So you put in somebody that is relatively inexperienced with a high probability can make mistakes. And this takes place 2 days before the Republican National Convention. If Trump had not turned his head, Trump would have been dead. And then the Republican National Convention would have been a food fight, to put it kindly, and maybe have put them in a situation where they couldn't even figure out who their nominee was going to be.
No, the nominee would have been Nikki Haley, the war hawk, and she's the strongest out of all the rest of those Republicans. Nikki Haley would have been in control, who wants war with Russia, war with China, give Israel all our goddamn money.
That timing and the utter failure on several levels in terms of the management of this issue, this was not bad decision making by the guys and gals on the ground. This was bad decision making at those levels above, which raises questions. Why? Why then? Why now? Maybe it is coincidence. I'm just not a big believer in coincidence.
Okay. It is odd. Now we have some what we call B-roll. So this is video without sound. This is Trump visiting the company store. Not where the gun was bought, but the company outlet, the manufacturer's outlet of where the gun was manufactured.
Yeah, Palmetto State Arms in South Carolina.
Right. It may have changed ownership between now and then. We don't, because we believe that the shooter's father bought this weapon 10 or 11 years ago.
Right.
But here he is demonstrating his Second Amendment bona fides. This is, a year ago. He's in a gun store, and it happens to be the company store of the company that manufactured the gun somewhere along the line, which was eventually used to harm him. I suppose this is just a historical footnote and a bizarre coincidence.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. The rifle itself, I mean, there are a lot of other manufacturers of that type of rifle. It's now called an M4 platform. The older versions, M16, AR-15. You've got Palmetto State makes its own variety of it. Daniel Defense, Sig Sauer. You just go down the list. But the point is that it comes with a 30-round magazine. You can be chambered with what they call the NATO round, the 5.56, and that just means it carries a higher pressure, higher velocity downrange. But it's not a sniper rifle. It can shoot people at some distance, but it's not the kind of rifle that the Delta Force or the SEAL Team 6 or the FBI hostage rescue team or your average police SWAT team uses to shoot somebody who represents a threat at a distance.
Did the shooter manifest any sense of professionalism?
I wouldn't call it so much professionalism, but he did think it through. He thought through, well, I need to get a ladder to get up there. He thought about bringing the rangefinder to make sure he knew roughly the distance that he was shooting. And so he was not somebody who was completely unskilled without any experience. But by the same token, I don't think he was not even what you'd call a competitive shooter that had been active because there are some teenagers. I know one girl here in Florida. She's the state champion in Florida shooting a .22 rifle, same skill. And boy, she can shoot. She's only 16 and she can shoot lights out. So the youth of the individual doesn't matter, but it's just the kind of experience. And it sounds like he didn't have extensive experience, but he had enough to know what he was doing.
What do you want to know from the Secret Service? If Jim Comer, who's the chair of the House Oversight Committee, which is investigating this, said, Larry Johnson, give us some questions for us to ask the Secret Service. What would your questions be, Larry?
Why wasn't the advance work properly done? Who made that decision? Number two, why didn't they have an integrated communications plan in place? Number three, why didn't they have a identification procedures in place so that they would know friend from foe that day? And fourth, why didn't they have that rooftop covered? Because it wasn't like there were dozens of buildings around. This is pretty simple, and it now turns out that SWAT team that we've seen in the iconic photographs, the ones to the right of Trump up on the sloped roof, apparently there was a tree that obscured part of their vision of where the shooter was. So that's why the team that was on the building to the left of Trump, they actually did have a clear vision, clear line of sight. But and the final question is, why wasn't Donald Trump pulled from the stage once these questions once there were questions raised about who is this guy climbing up on this roof? Why? That's very simple. And we've already caught the Secret Service director, Cheadle, lying or displaying gross incompetence when she said, "Oh, the counter sniper team, they were on the roof. You can't have a steep roof, and yet they were on a steeper roof than what the shooter was on." I mean, it's just it's ludicrous.
Meaning what? They were afraid to do their job because they thought they were going to fall off the roof?
No, they were saying that they couldn't see the sniper because he was on a steeper roof.
Wow.
I mean, it's just
no, Larry. These are great questions. These are profound questions, and I know the audience appreciates them because I can see the size of the audience watching and their comments. As you learn more, listen, I'm 5,000 miles away from the U.S. right now, supposedly on vacation, but this is very important. As you learn more, please let us know, and we'll resume these segments so that the fans of the show who value your work and your knowledge can hear what you have learned.
Great. Well, I will do so.
I think Jackson was on there today. So hello, Moats. Hello to our friends George Galloway over the pond. Good to see all of you guys, all of you truth tellers. We don't have an agenda on this show. Our goal is the truth, and wherever the facts lead us, we will follow them. So that is our goal here on the show. So let's get into it today. The media and the government want you to believe the official story that 20-year-old Thomas Crooks tried and failed to assassinate President Trump. That he was a lone gunman, right? That's the official story. There's now overwhelming evidence to overturn that official story and raise serious questions that at the very least he had help, and at the most there were multiple shooters. We spoke to an eyewitness who was in the bleachers behind President Trump. She witnessed Corey being shot and killed and saw gunshots hitting multiple locations. And we're going to share that interview with you here in a moment. It's shocking. It's heartbreaking. She's an amazing woman. She comes from an amazing family. And we're going to hear her story in a second. It'll blow your mind. Now, first, though, moments ago, the House of Representatives subpoenaed the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle. Here is from Congress of the United States of America and the House of Representatives and the Committee on Oversight and Accountability and Congressman Comer's office saying that, wait a minute, you were going to testify before Congress on Monday about the failure of the Secret Service, but now it looks like Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, has stepped in and will not allow her to testify. What? Really? What is Alejandro Mayorkas trying to prevent her from saying in front of Congress?
Well, it's interesting. On the same day that DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, says we're going to do our own investigation, meaning Congress, we don't really need you. You don't need her. We've got this. So you need to step back. She actually doesn't need a congressional testimony. She doesn't need to be photographed or videotaped answering real questions. We're on this one.
Someone in the chat says, Clayton forgot to shave today. No, I didn't. I intentionally didn't shave today. You want to hear a story? The other day, I shaved and cut my nose wide open, and blood was pouring for like 20 minutes. Like an hour. I couldn't stop it.
Yes,
So-
I had to run to the drugstore and get him a styptic pen.
So I'm holding off on the shaving for a few days.
So he's rocking the 5 o'clock shadow
I got the
on
5 o'clock.
purpose.
Yeah, it's not unintentional. Thanks to the chat for being eagle-eyed, though. I appreciate that. So now, according to the subpoena, Kimberly Cheadle was set to testify. She's not any longer, and so now as you point out, Congress is saying we're going to take matters into our own hand. We're going to subpoena. We want all of the diagrams, photos, aerial information, communication that you guys had on the day and leading up to this event. Fascinating. So we'll see if we get answers from Congress on this.
Including what was the plan? We know what was executed. We know where people were and where people were not. Quite obviously not, right?
Yeah.
But was there a different plan? Because there are some people, including Dan Bongino, who was former Secret Service agent, saying, oh, no, there was a plan to have people on that roof. So what happened?
She stood them down.
Right.
We now know she stood them down. They were told to stand down and not go on that roof for their safety because of a sloping roof, which is, okay, that's now her responsibility. That's her fault. Why did she ask them to stand down and not go on that sloped roof?
Right.
Which everyone is mocking now, of course. So you need to ask
memes
yourself.
Are everything, though, about the slope. I'm at least having fun with that. I hope you are, too.
Yeah, if you're watching on Twitter, you see the cows on slanted roofs and so forth. They have the cows and all sorts of things on slanted roofs. So anyway, I want to know why Mayorkas doesn't want her to testify. Why? What is Alejandro Mayorkas trying to hide by not having her go in front of Congress? And new video has just surfaced from the deep state, Satan herself, Victoria Nuland. Here she is just a few hours before the shooting, guaranteeing that Trump won't be president because a surprise is coming.
Our economy, et cetera. So I don't think that Donald Trump is going to be president. So if that's what Putin's betting on, he's going to get a unhappy surprise. I think that is number one.
An unhappy surprise. What could that be?
I mean, she seems very psychic. She knew the Nord Stream pipeline would not go into effect. That's strange.
She's great at predictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if we should hire her for some kind of, Madame Crystal Ball events. That'd be funny. She might be fun at parties.
She'd be great. And yeah, it'd be like, call me now. What was her name? The old, the woman you call the hotline. Call me now. Anyway,
I don't know.
Victoria. Anyway,
I'd be checking
meanwhile,
her family tree to see if that shooter came from, like if he's anywhere in her branches.
Well, yeah, I mean, other than the fact that he was in a BlackRock commercial inside a school, and then BlackRock, of course, we know their connections to the federal government and the CIA. So other than that connection, who knows? But again, they want you to believe that he's the guy, right? Thomas Crooks. They want you to believe that he's the shooter, right? Meanwhile, CBS is reporting that a detonator was found on Crooks's body right next to where his body was shot and killed on that rooftop. His parents also called police on the day of the rally. Really? He's missing? He's 20 years old?
So we're learning the shooter's parents called law enforcement on the day of the rally to say they couldn't find their son. We know they're cooperating with law enforcement, and this comes as a new photograph obtained by local station WPXI shows a detonator device found next to Thomas Matthew Crooks' body after the attempted assassination. Crooks had explosives inside his car, found parked near the rally, and bomb-making materials inside his home. The alarming photo raises questions about whether Crooks had other plans as he opened fire. Less than 200 yards away from the rally stage while positioned on a rooftop, which the Secret Service says was within the perimeter delegated to local law enforcement.
And now we're learning that police knew about Crooks 3 hours before the shooting. He came in with a rangefinder, and police and Secret Service said they'd keep an eye on him. They were aware of him. And new video from DC Drano this morning reveals the shooter was walking around 1 hour beforehand. Take a look. So you can see him here in the background there, walking around, scouting out the location.
But
apparently,
the police are
this
back
is
there.
1 hour beforehand, walking around, looking up security. What's this guy doing here? But that's an hour beforehand, 1 hour ahead of time. And police didn't engage him. He was allowed to leave the area. Where's his gun, by the way, at this point? Well, he was actually allowed to leave the area and only return with it, was able to come back with a backpack. Eventually climbing on the ladder near that HVAC unit onto the structure behind the buildings and then onto the roof.
Well, some reporting says that he went through security check.
He did
and
go
security said,
with a
let's keep
rangefinder.
an eye on him. But then they didn't. But
Right.
then let's, the same way you keep an eye on your kid when you're at a barbecue.
So you bring a rangefinder, which is not maybe altogether that crazy. I mean, after all, you've got a lot of individuals who, are using it to be able to see closer.
Sure.
So that, you want to, like you wear, use binoculars at a musical or something like that, right? To get a closer view of the stage.
Like at the opera, those.
Yeah, like the little monocle thing.
Hold. Sure.
And when I go to a concert at a festival these days, they open your backpack and they check it. You're going into a presidential convention with a backpack that's not checked?
Well, interesting piece about the backpack story. I spoke to an eyewitness on this who said they were told and sent emails before their arrival, no bags. Not allowed to bring bags, no bags. And eyewitnesses were seeing other people were bringing bags and saying, well, they're going to be upset because they're going to have their bags taken. Like, why are you bringing a bag? We got emails saying explicitly no bags. And then they were able to bring bags right through security. They didn't take people's bags at all. They hardly even looked through them. This is unbelievable. So what's going on here with the bag searches? They received emails saying no bags. People showed up with bags and were allowed to bring bags in. Okay, that's a huge lapse. I'd love to hear Kim Cheadle's response to that. Why did they make that sudden change? Why was that suddenly allowed to happen when they had received precautionary emails ahead of time? I wouldn't bring a bag if I saw that. I'd be like, no, they're going to take my backpack.
Right.
Right. So why even bring it?
I mean, Clayton's been known to smuggle burritos
into a movie
places.
Yeah.
Where we're not supposed to bring in food.
Yeah.
He has done that.
But not a rifle.
But not in a backpack. In his pocket.
Now I just carry burritos in my pocket, if you know what I mean. All right, so now we have new video evidence also shows the shots fired at the hydraulics that were coming from the back left side of the stage. People reported shots hit, and then you can see like a gas exploding. People are wondering where all this like mist and gas was coming from. Now we know that was hitting this hydraulics behind the stage, and then it created like a bit of a cloud there. So this is coming from the left side. And you can see on the left side of your screen, this person ducking down as well. And these shots coming from the left side, according to eyewitnesses. And we have eyewitnesses saying these initial shots came from the direction of the gymnastics building that we talked about here yesterday on the show, which is about 400 yards away. And again, this is also in the same direction as the water tower from that direction to that stage where that hydraulic section was hit. And where when those other bystanders were also hit behind the stage area where President Trump was speaking, over 400 yards away. A building, by the way, the gymnastics building, that was vacant on Saturday and which had the same line of sight as the water tower. Multiple eyewitnesses now say the water tower direction. Shots were fired from that location. Multiple eyewitnesses.
And they had been right by the fence where the other shooter was. There was one I heard in the water tower. There was one by the fence.
And still, obviously, initial reports. But what we do know.
First crack of the gunfire, and I just screamed, "It's the sniper! It's the sniper!" And he was firing down toward the water tower.
That's what we're hearing.
Gentleman behind me, I was one seat. He was to the right of me. He could see the sharpshooter behind Trump. He said the sharpshooter shot to the left. He killed the gentleman in the water tower here.
CNN almost had a heart attack yesterday when U.S. Army sniper Corey Mills was on CNN and suggests that the July 13th assassination attempt on Trump could have been a setup. And he also pointed out the water tower, and Kate Baldwin like flipped out. She's like, "Oh my, what? You're saying this was a setup?" And he's like, all the evidence seems to, he's like, "I know, I hate to say it." And they're almost like freaking out. Like, what are they going to do? Like cut away from him? But here he is, he's done this thousands of times. He's a veteran U.S. Army sniper, and he said, just doesn't add up. It had to be a setup. Watch.
You know, I look at all of these things and I look at different videos where an assailant will pull a firearm on a law enforcement officer, and the first thing they do is they immediately pull and draw and mitigate the threat and the risk. You know, I ask why the local law enforcement officer did not do so. The other thing is that when you set up an advanced team, I keep hearing this about the perimeter elements.
Yeah.
You know, the perimeter is actually established by your threats that are in the area. So if I don't have any threats outside of 100 yards, okay, fine, I can cordon off a certain area. But if I have a building 160 yards, perfectly adjacent to the stage, that's an obvious threat, especially with an elevated position that has overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sniper's paradise. And, you know, we talk about Eagle's Nest. You also have, which no one talks about, but the water tower.
So what I'm hearing from you is it's not a failure on the ground for sure, but
100%.
also a failure in advance.
I think it's a failure in advance. I think it's a failure to.
So then it dives deeper into the setup and the water tower. It's great. It's like 8 minutes long. I encourage you all to watch it. Now, earlier today, I spoke with Melody Hook, an eyewitness. She was there. She was behind Donald Trump in the bleachers with her husband and family. She saw Corey shot and killed right before her eyes. She says the official story is not true. You need to hear this, and wait until you hear what she says about the shooter's bomb-making evidence and the bomb crew and the FBI who showed up to take away that evidence. Watch.
The shots came from behind that red harvester that was sitting there. It didn't come from in front of it. Yes.
So it didn't come from the building that everyone says it's coming from.
Well, see, that's just it. We were in the bleachers. Corey was positioned over here. He was on the far side of, there was 3 sets of bleachers. Trump was in the middle. We were here. And then there was another set off to the other side. We were in the same set that Corey was in. So he was
Corey, who lost his life, the firefighter who lost his life.
Yes. Yes. He was clear to the one end and we were kind of towards the other end. Like, we watched the snipers go up onto the roof, get into position. And prior to that, I said to my husband, okay, we have a 5 o'clock start time. You know, Trump's to speak at 5 o'clock. You know, what's going on here? So the snipers did not go onto the roof. I look back on my photos last night's time. They didn't go onto the roof till 5:08 is the time I took pictures of them climbing up the roof on the 2 roofs behind us. We only saw 4 snipers positioned that evening. Could there have been more off that we couldn't see? Possibly, but those are the only 4 that we saw. So they get up there. It was around 5:08 when I was recording them, and they kept looking. After they got up there, they kept looking to, straight ahead of them. And down below on the ground, there's like military. But I said to my husband kind of jokingly, I'm like, wow, seems kind of lax, like not that much presence of, like protection right around where Trump is going to be at. For somebody as big as what Trump is, I was a little bit dumbfounded. Like I jokingly said to my friend the day before that, she says, listen, I'm worried about you. I don't want you to go into this. There's crazies everywhere. I said, listen, we're going to the safest place I feel we could be. There's going to be so much Secret Service there, blah, blah, blah. I said, the only thing I'm worried about is my cell phone dying because I don't know if my battery is going to last. Like, just joking about it, because I seriously, I felt safe. Fast forward ahead a little bit, we get to the point where it's almost time for Trump to come out. And they start, playing different music and everything. And music starts, Trump starts to come out. And of course, we're all focused on him. No, that's who you're waiting to see. You're not going to look around at anything else around you. You're just focused on him. He comes out, like I said, he talks to my son and his, my friend's dad, like they're yelling, we love you, Trump. And he stops and points at him, says, I love you too. And just calm and cool. And he goes out and interacts with some people, goes up and starts talking. And like, we're only a few minutes into it. Like, he only spoke 10 minutes. Right. It wasn't very long. Yeah. He was speaking at all. So all of a sudden you hear like all this commotion off to our right. And it's just like, but like I said, you're at a Trump rally. It's noisy. People are not quiet at a Trump rally. So I just kind of looked at my husband, gave him like this weird look. And at that point, I think he was more this way than Trump. Like he's starting to get, so we're just sitting there and all of a sudden you heard it. You just hear the gunshots. And sorry. I looked down at my niece and I just yelled at the boys. I said, "Get Riley." So they dove, they just like dog piled on top of her. They're just laying on her, covering her. There was a couple of kids behind us, and I grabbed the little girl, just held her, and I said, I got you. And I laid on top of her I put her down in the bleachers and where your feet go. And I'm laying on her and I just start praying. Like, please, God, please make sure we're okay. Save us, Sorry, my dog's barking. I'm like, please just save us. And I was just trying my hardest to compose myself, but I didn't know what to do. So we're all laying there, and the thing I remember the most was Riley looking up at me and just the fear in her face and the screaming. She would not stop screaming. That's all it was. It was just pure panic. And the shots just acted like they lasted forever and they weren't stopping. And I'm telling you, I never, ever, it was surreal. It was just, I did not dream something like that was going to happen. I saw Corey get hit I saw him get shot, and I yelled, because you got to think this all took place within a matter of seconds, seconds. And I yelled back, like where we were at, the bleachers were kind of open, and I yelled back at the security behind us, and I yelled, "He's been shot. He's been shot." And I think at this time they could all just everybody was stunned. Like nobody had a clue what to do or where to go. And by this time, then they come up around, and our set of bleachers was just flooded with cops. Like right now, they just come out of everywhere. Let's just put it this way, where my kids were sitting at, when we look at the pictures of how the bleachers were, I don't know how it missed them, because they were right in line with all of that, just the way everything was going. And yeah, and I am beyond angry. I am beyond frustrated, because this could have been 1000% prevented. There was nobody over there. There was nobody to watch us, and there was nobody to protect us. And when you have that many people there and there's a chance of something like that, I feel you need to have more than less. And there was definitely not more than less that day. I want answers. I want to know why we were all put in such danger. And a good friend of mine, my phone was blowing up because so many knew we were there. And a friend of mine messaged me. I don't want to say names or anything, but she messaged me and she says to me, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're fine. We're fine. Everything's okay. We're home." And this was later that evening. This was later into the evening. And she says to me, she said, "FBI and bomb squad are at our house." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well," so I was asking her last night, I said, "How far away are you from where this all took place?" And she said, probably 10 miles, maybe, if that. They found the white van. The white van was found. She saw them tow it from right around her location. It was right next door to her.
Now they're not talking about
the
10
white
miles.
van that was supposedly full of explosives, and that guy was supposed to have had a detonator on him. Now you tell me why He goes to all the hassle when he has a van full of explosives and a detonator. Why was it parked 10 miles away from the fairgrounds?
10 miles. And how does a 20-year-old scrawny guy in summer heat walk with a gun
10
all the way
miles.
from that 10 miles to
10
this
miles.
location?
Exactly.
What did she say the FBI and the bomb squad said to her? Did they say anything to her?
All that she would tell me was that they told her that they could not leave their residence. They were to stay indoors and they could not divulge any information. I don't care if Trump is if you hate him tremendously, if you can wish evil upon somebody, you need to find your heart. I mean, we need God back in our country so bad. I went to church yesterday and prayed with our pastor after work because I don't know how to navigate this. I don't know how to be strong for my son. I don't know how to be strong for my niece. I lay down at night. I hear the screams. I hear the shots. I see all the fear in everybody's faces. I see us all laying on top of each other, trying to protect each other. How do you get that out of your head? Like, I don't know how to go about. I don't know. I don't know how to do it.
Oh, bless her.
Yeah. I mean, think about having to dive onto your child to protect her in those stands, and then those people watching somebody right a few seats over from you be killed in Corey.
And until that moment, I hadn't considered how intimidating this is for Trump's supporters as well. Who's going to feel safe now going to a rally? And how intimidating this is for the political process. It's very discouraging for those of us who think that we are exercising our right to support our candidate of choice.
Right.
And what the repercussions are for that. Something that has been haunting me all day is that the Butler County Sheriff, Michael Sloop, said that the officer who climbed up on the roof encountered the shooter, had the gun pointed at him, and then climbed right back down, said, well, that guy is not a coward. He's a hero, because had he not interfered, then the bullet would have been fired sooner. President Trump would not have turned his head. And so that makes it a near miss. So that guy is a hero. But you can't have it both ways, because by that logic, that guy got the fireman killed. And so you're just choosing one life for another, because by that logic, had it hit President Trump, it would have missed the innocent civilian. And so you're choosing which life to value there, which is a horrible thing to do. So I can't get on board with that. Like, oh, we just delayed the crime, because isn't the job of law enforcement to stop the crime?
Also,
full stop.
Also, it's a lie, because we have eyewitnesses who saw that police officer climb up the ladder, and confront, get face to face with this individual, and then fall off down to the ground.
Right.
So not, oh, there's a guy with a gun. Okay, you're shooting a gun. You're pointing a gun at me. Let me back off. I'm going to go back down the ladder. No. This person, he just fell off. He just fell off the ladder onto the ground.
Do you think? What are we surmising from that?
Well, I'm saying that this idea that he was like heroic, and he's like, you better put that gun down. I'm going to back up. And he bought time for President Trump.
Right.
Like, he saved President Trump's life because he backed up.
Right.
And then he fell. There was no reporting of that from the sheriff. He fell off the ladder, fell down to the ground.
But again, if you're taking credit for saving Trump, you have to take responsibility for having the fireman killed. That's the only way that logic works. Right. And so then that family has now a case, in my opinion. If you've just said we saved this guy by delaying this, then you're responsible for the death of the innocent man. I don't know. I would like to, again, I have an appetite for consequences for all involved in this. So,
and the two motorcycle police officers who assisted the Trump team when they were leaving, and they were now suspended as a result of it, because they didn't have the authority to go after and help the Trump team. So two motorcycle police officers we're now also hearing reports about. So I think the official story is now collapsing. And I think we need to be very skeptical when the government tells us anything. Mm-hmm. And you're having all of these eyewitnesses, and you have, for instance, Melody and her husband, who are avid hunters, who are around guns all the time. They know. And you have all of these eyewitnesses who are seeing individuals and hearing gunshots coming from a direction that was not where this building was. Why do you also have Kimberly Cheadle telling these Secret Service officers not to go on top of that rooftop? Why was there no one else in the water tower?
Right.
Why were these locations not secured? Why was their security cleared out behind President Trump during the speech? All of these things. And now Kimberly Cheadle is not going to be testifying because Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, doesn't want her going before Congress. Like, really?
Well, and it'd be one thing if her story was consistent, but her saying that about the sloped roof when that's not as sloped as where they had the snipers, like
doesn't make any
her
sense.
whole logic falls apart.
No, it never was cohesive to begin with. And
I'd almost believe it more. Natalie, we were talking this morning, it was pretty hot that day. It would almost be more believable if she said, well, it was hot that day. We didn't want these guys on a hot roof.
It was cat on a hot tin roof.
Cat on a hot tin roof.
Actually, that's a redacted viewer who pointed that out. Like it was record temperatures, so it might have been hot up there, and he's laying there for how long? His behavior seems more and more to me almost like the Imperious Curse from Harry Potter. Like he was put under something, doing something on someone's behalf. But I think another interesting part of this is that as this narrative crumbles, how the media continues to hold to the single narrative, right? We've seen rumblings around, it was Iran. Okay, there was a threat of Iran, but there was no increased security because of Iran. And they continue to lack curiosity about these pieces that continue to have the rug pulled out from under them. So that just makes us want to ask even more questions because we're not even a week out from the event. So we're going to continue to ask them here on Redacted.
No, and I also should point out, I mean, I've said multiple times here on the show, the deep state will not allow him to become president of the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have confirmation of this from multiple Democratic sources. Chuck Schumer speaking on behalf of the CIA, basically, warning that something bad is going to happen to President Trump if he keeps needling the CIA and the deep state, basically. Victoria Nuland, just hours before, saying the same thing. So again, they do not want him to become president of the United States, regardless of how you feel about him and if you feel like he's like divinity walking in a human body. But nevertheless, the deep state is not happy with him. They do not want him to be president of the United States. And they absolutely fear that he comes in and he wipes them clean and he shuts them down. That's their greatest fear, that he ends their jobs.
Yes.
So we'll have more on this. We're going to continue to follow this story, and we're going to continue to look deeper into a lot of the questions that still need answering, and we hope that we get them, but we will follow that. We're also going to be talking today about President Biden trying to basically
poll this evening. That's up there with is the Pope a Catholic and do bears defecate in the woods? It's such an obvious thing that either the U.S. Secret Service, at least in Pennsylvania, are the Keystone Cops. They couldn't shoot the inside of a barn door. The men and women of the presidential detail made such a hash of protecting Donald Trump that you have to conclude they were in on the crime. The only alternative would be that they'd been appointed to their positions in a box-ticking exercise, were not up to the job, shouldn't have been placed in charge of anything, not a Welk stall, not a student union cafe. And can that really be true? If it is, it will cheer America's enemies all over the world. Because if that's what the inner core, the blue chip of the American Secret Service really is like, then Charlie Chaplin could have written the script. But much more likely is that young Mr. Crooks was not the gunman. At least not the gunman that was supposed to hit the head of the former and soon to be current president of the United States. There must have been another shooter. Crooks was just the patsy, the Lee Harvey Oswald of this inside job. His head was helpfully blown apart, but only after he'd fired off 5 shots, it turns out. It turns out that there were Secret Servicemen at that building, but they were all inside the building. Just exactly how they were to protect the president from inside the building is yet to be explained, but it has been explained by the head of the Secret Service, a young woman whose name escapes me, that they hadn't a sniper on top of the roof because the roof had a slope on it. And she was afraid that the Secret Service men employed would fall off it. I'm not making any of this up. But there's now very real reason to believe that behind or on top of that water tower was the real gunman who came so very close to changing the course of American and indeed world history. That the mere strand of a blonde wig could possibly be all that turned the history of the mightiest country on earth, the history of the world conflicts in which we are in, is something that should not easily be brushed over. This is a major league scandal. And if Trump has any sense at all, and I know that it sometimes looks like he doesn't, he must keep the pressure up on this administration, not just for the incessant incitement that they have maintained over the last years, painting Trump as Hitler, as Stalin, as a Russian agent, which ineluctably led to someone somewhere being prepared to go down in history as the young man that rid America of this turbulent priest. But incessant pressure on the Secret Service failure. I know, given he's in their hands until November, though I've always said that that is unwise, more unwise still for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to want anything to do with the FBI, anything to do with the CIA, anything to do with the Secret Service details, who almost certainly killed both his father and his uncle. I know that Trump is in a difficult position, but if I were him, I'd definitely have a shadow security team, a private shadow security team with me at all times from now until November, because it's quite evident that the sheer desperation of the Democratic Party leaders and the Democrat establishment in the fancy newspapers and in the fading broadcasting companies, their desperation to stop Trump cannot just be about his syntax, his pussy grabbing, his bringing down the standards of the office, standards set by dozens of American presidents before him. It cannot be that. It must be something more serious. And my guess is that the answer lies in Ukraine. And my guess is that Trump knows that very well. Trump is going to strip bare the rampant, deep, multi-billion-dollar corruption of the American administration in Ukraine. All these 60 billion price tags that Zelensky takes away with him every time he visits the United States are about more, much more than just providing half-tracks for the poor, bloody infantry of the Ukrainian armed forces. They are about corruption on a scale the likes of which we have never seen before, ever, in all human history. This is the biggest scandal case that hopefully will ever exist in human history. And Trump is zeroing in on it. When he says that he's going to stop the war between November and January, you better believe him, because there is nothing that Trump is more determined to do than stop the Ukrainian war, unseat the little Napoleon, Zelensky, and then open the books. And when he opens the books all the way back to Burisma, the oil company that was paying Hunter Biden $80,000 a month for a no-show job, was just the tip of the iceberg. And that many other sons, daughters, nephews, nieces, mistresses, and whatever the male equivalent of mistresses is, were all on the payroll in Ukraine. They were all looting the Ukraine. But since the war began, the scale of American subvention to Ukraine can only smell like a huge money laundering operation. And it's going to bring a lot of people down in corporate America, in the military industrial complex, of course, in the soon to be fleeing Ukrainian regime, but it will destroy the Democratic Party as we know it. I mean, end it. Because the noses that were in the trough are the high and mighty of the Democratic Party, and Trump is going for it all. If you don't believe me, look at who he's picked as his vice presidential running mate. J.D. Vance is many things, some of them honorable, some of them admirable, others deplorable. But let me just fasten on one of them for the moment. J.D. Vance is even more hostile to the corruption between America and Ukraine than Donald Trump is. If Donald Trump showed any signs of faltering in the unmasking of this grand larceny of the American purse, J.D. Vance is determined to steady his hand. Vance has opposed all of the subventions going to Ukraine. He has opposed the Ukraine war right from the beginning. He does not want or intend to see America enter World War III against Russia. The orange cowboy has picked the king of the hillbillies. His hillbilly elegy is a joy to read. It is a Rust Belt spectacular. And Vance is going to sweep the Rust Belt for the Trump-Vance ticket by a landslide. They will win Ohio, Pennsylvania. They will win Wisconsin. They will win Michigan. And that's the end of the presidential election, folks, whatever happens elsewhere. So Vance is against World War III, against Russia. Against China, he's not so sure, although he did sagely make the point today at the Republican convention that China's rise is fueled not by military bases, not by getting into war after war, but by development, by helping the countries that it is now in the closest possible alliance with through the Belt and Road Initiative. So at least, at last, a man who can see straight, if not shoot straight. The dangerous thing about Vance ties back to the issue of the assassination attempt. Vance may not want war with Russia. He may not even be sure about wanting war with China, but he sure wants war with Iran. Over and over and over again, Vance has stated that there's no point in little bombing runs, there's no point in punching Iran unless you punch it very hard indeed. And given that Vance, like Trump, is in the pocket of the Israel lobby in the United States to an extraordinary depth, you can be sure that Netanyahu will be working up the case for punching Iran hard in the first days of a Trump-Vance administration. So breathe a sigh of relief. We're not going to World War III unless it starts under Biden. And who's going to march to war under Joe Biden? Increasingly unhinged, demented. Unless it starts before November, we're not going to World War III in Ukraine, but we might very well be going to it in the Persian Gulf. And if that doesn't frighten you, you haven't been paying attention. The King's speech was today. There was no stammering, only stammering. And there was much bonhomie.
This mental institution called St. Elizabeth's in Washington, D.C. At that time, I was working for an agency called the Maryland Natural Resources Police. In a word, what we did, a police boat. I was on a police boat, right? And they did all kinds of stuff to do with outdoors and wildlife. And mostly I did search and rescue on the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, bottom line is where I kept my police boat was Sandy Point State Park, right? Very close to Washington, D.C. And so I'd go there and they would tell us, Secret Service and different people would say, look, the people from St. Elizabeth are going to come down here this weekend, and they bring them down every week to like go. They'd be grilling, they'd be swimming, hanging out at the park, and John Hinckley was one of them. And so they brought the people from this mental institution down, and you literally see John Hinckley walking around the park, going swimming in swimming shorts and stuff.
Wow,
how crazy is that?
What did you make of the meal he had scheduled with Neil Bush?
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about the meal with Neil Bush part, but I mean, none of it shocks me. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I'll say this. I'll say this about the one thing I'll say about this. The thing that I think that you connect to them is a lot of people felt that Ronald Reagan was not, his presidency wasn't going well, that things weren't going well, that he probably wasn't going to win the second time around. There are a lot of people that argue that getting shot and surviving it kind of makes you look like a hero, and that's what really helped him to win the second time around. You get shot, you go down, you get up, and people think, wow, that guy's tough or a hero or whatever. It gives, an air of, being a tough guy, being the cowboy, being the bad guy, being the strong guy. And a lot of people, interestingly enough, felt that was what helped Ronald Reagan to win the second time around.
Yeah, because he jumped over 20 percentage points in popularity after the assassination attempt. So it's definitely something that the public rallies behind. So when you saw what happened with Trump then, as it went down on that day, the news came out, what came to your mind based upon your experience?
Well, we have a historical context here in the United States, and the historical context is the deep state killed. It's clear. Based on my research, I would argue this: they killed JFK, they killed RFK, they killed Martin Luther King, they killed Malcolm X. I mean, on and on and on. Anytime the deep state saw somebody that, for whatever reason, they saw as a threat, they were going to kill them. And lots more people. Fred Ham, I could go on and on and on. If they didn't like a guy, they were going to kill it. So because of that historical context, and add this, I've been going on Galloway, and Galloway and I had been talking about it plenty of times. Like, yeah, Trump better watch his back. Yeah, they're going to try to kill him. Robert Fico, he took a couple of bullets when he pushed back against the EU and NATO and the same deep state people. He didn't. And when that happened, I said, Viktor Orban better watch his back, right? So I was already of a mindset that the deep state had a bullseye on him. Of course, the day before, Joe Biden says, we should put a bullseye on Donald Trump. The rhetoric was there. The historical context was there. The present context where people like Fico are getting shot because they push back against what is, U.S. deep state foreign policy. So because of I put all that together to say, at that point, I had to suspect that it was a deep state hit. All of those things come together. And soon as the guy gets shot, I can remember a guy that got shot. And when the police looked into it and did the investigation, the first thing they saw was he had been getting texts from somebody saying, I'm going to get you. You better leave my girlfriend alone or I'm going to get you. When you see those texts, you pretty much got yourself suspect, right? When you hear all of these people, there's the intelligence community has 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you, right? When you hear people, Trump has to be eliminated, that's the kind of language they were using, right? And Trump gets shot right off the bat. You're like, you think, without any knowledge whatsoever, I think the deep state's behind this. So that was my immediate first inclination.
Has it become the method of the last resort, though, to have a lone gunman these days? It's not that frequent as the incidences you cited. It seems to me now they try and destroy your reputation. In Trump's case, his reputation was enhanced. They try and criminalize you and throw you in prison. In Trump's case, his reputation was enhanced by that as well. It seems they had to go to the third strike to try and shut him up.
That's the discussion that was already had. You know what I mean? Tucker Carlson had that discussion. So it was like at that point, all these things had been talked about prior to the shooting, and it was, I reported on the whole Russiagate thing. So they went, all through his career, making up lies about Donald Trump, lying to the court about Donald Trump, and no one was held accountable, leaking false stories about. I'm not a Trump fan, but what I am a fan of justice. I think everybody deserves justice. Everybody deserves, I'm a lefty. I'm not a conservative, but I am a person who believes in justice. I don't believe in justice for people on the left or people on the right or people in the middle. Donald Trump has a right to run, and the people that want to vote for Donald Trump have a right to vote for him. And darn it, if Donald Trump wins, he should be president, right? That's what I believe in. However, apparently not everybody agrees with me. And so, it was just a situation wherein Donald Trump has recently done another. I haven't really gotten all the information from it, but apparently he did another interview. And in the interview, he was kind of saying, I don't really want war with Russia. I don't really want war with China. He doesn't want to get into something that's going to get a nuclear war and kill us all. How crazy is Donald Trump? He doesn't want a nuclear war that's going to kill everybody, right? He's like, I got issues with China, but I think we can work them out other ways than everybody getting killed, for God's sake, right? Okay. Well, there's a lot of money to be made from war. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that are getting money on all these think tanks, all these other things, and he's costing them billions of dollars. And it's a whole lot cheaper to buy a bullet than it is to have to deal with the fact that Donald Trump's going to cut off your money. So now I say all that to say this. Look, I'm also a person of reason. And until I have some conclusive evidence, I'm going to say this. Is it possible, theoretically, that this kid was just a mentally ill person that decided to shoot at Trump? Theoretically, that is possible. But when you start looking at the circumstances, the history, when you start looking at the circumstances surrounding the incident, it's kind of hard to believe. Now, of course, as I said, I'm a reasonable person. Is it possible? I can't say it's not impossible. I'm just saying it's kind of hard to believe that the people who shot all the other presidents or guys who wanted to be president in usually very similar ways, that these guys are standing around, some friggin' guy's laying on a roof with a gun. People are screaming, hey, there's a guy on the roof and he's got a gun. And they're like, nothing to see here. Let's just go back over and finish our coffee until after he gets his shots off. At some point, you got to be a little suspicious. I'm just saying.
Yeah, so we've got a question from Minnie Whipster, and I'll give my interpretation in terms of the logistics of this, how I think it goes down, and I'll hand it over to you. If the deep state tried to take him out, why did they use a 20-year-old? My interpretation is, if you are constantly putting it out there that he's evil, personified, he's going to destroy America, it's the end of the world unless he's taken out, he's a target, someone is going to be inspired, ISIS style, to step up to the plate. And if on that very day they do so, security stands down. We've all seen the videos of the sniper and the marksman, and they're facing off, and nothing is happening. And my understanding is that guy had free reign to take him out. So is it the case that they just make security lax and let these things happen?
That's certainly a possibility too. And I think that has to be part of the discussion. I'm glad you brought that up. Because let's just say, again, I like to entertain every possibility, right? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this kid was not directed by the deep state. Okay. They've used patsies before in one way or another, right? They've used, somebody to work through for one reason or the other. And as we've discussed, you got a bunch of people standing around saying he should be shot. He's a traitor to our country. He's going to destroy our democracy. So you set up an environment where some mentally ill person maybe is likely to do that. 9/11, there are a lot of people that believe that maybe the government either did it, or they knew it was going on and maybe they facilitated it. Maybe they turned their head a little bit. Maybe they didn't see anything that was going on. You know what I mean? There are a number of ways that you can facilitate an act. You don't have to buy the gun and put it in somebody's hand. If you facilitate it, if I commit a murder and I facilitate the murder, I am in fact a conspirator or an accomplice to the murder, and I can be, charged. I can go to jail for that, right? So there are numerous, and these people talk about the intelligence community. They're not idiots, right? They're very smart. So could they have used this kid as a patsy? Possibly. Could they have facilitated it and set the table where it's real easy? Could they have, and let me add this, could they have been monitoring him and kind of got an idea, hey, I think he wants to move on Trump, and set the table, get out of the way, make it happen? How do you wander around a pre-presidential rally with a long guy? How do you get up there and nobody sees you? And then when you get up there, now we're understanding like an hour beforehand that the police had like a picture of him they were circulating, that the parents had called the police. Hey, I don't know where my son is. You know what I mean? There's just so many things that you have to say. They're very sharp at plausible deniability. They're very, very smart. These people know ways to set it up where you can't pin the finger on them. And sometimes you can facilitate an incident without having all your fingerprints all over it and get the outcome. So what it comes down to is this. Still, I think most reasonable people, other than like the crazy, cultish Democrats who just like, how they're standing around going, oh, too bad he missed, but other than those people, conservatives or independents like me, who are not a member, and a lot of people I know on the left, are like, yeah, kind of look suspicious. You have to look at that and you have to suspect that they had a hand in it. And let me add one other thing. And I will bet you this. I bet you Donald Trump suspects that they had a hand in it. And I bet it will affect the way that he does things. And I bet you if I'm RFK Jr. and they say to me, hey, we're going to give you some Secret Service protection, I'd be like, yeah, no, thanks. I'll be good. I'll figure a way out. It's kind of like suicide. You're going to let the fox in the hen house if you're asking for Secret Service protection.
Yeah, you've raised a number of interesting points there. So with Hinckley, before the attempted assassination on Reagan, he was arrested crossing state lines with guns, heading to somewhere someone was giving a speech, and he was only detained for a matter of hours. It's almost as if he was in play to do these things, and he was allowed to roam with his own free will. So you've mentioned about Trump and his security. Why on earth would you surround yourself with bodyguards from the US federal government 3-letter agencies that were the same ones as you just rightly identified, Russiagate, etc.? Why wouldn't you have some good old boy, ex-Marine guys you've known for a long time doing your personal security? Do you think now that after that bullet just whizzed past his head and grazed his ear, do you think now that he is completely determined not to, as previously when he came into power and he surrounded himself, he said he was going to clean the swamp, but he surrounded himself with swamp creatures. Do you think now he will be more than ever determined to get the people that are embedded by the deep state, from the Clinton crime family, from the Bush crime family, that have been embedded in the CIA, for example, for decades?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, and let's be honest, I think there was a certain amount of naivety to Donald Trump. You know what I mean? I think he, like many people, sadly in America, felt like, oh no, our government, they'd never do anything like that. That was the past, and I don't think they'd try to take me out. Would they go far? Would they do all the Russiagate? I think he felt they've done all that they're going to do. They tried to charge him with everything but friggin' mopery on the high seas, So I figured at this point, he figured they've charged me with every charge. They've done everything. I think I'm okay. I don't think, and I understand how a person could think that they won't go that far. I do think that he's a brand new Donald Trump now. I do think he's a different Donald Trump. And I do think if you look back, I think he's got to look back and say, I was on a phone call in the Oval Office and there were Judases all around me, And they went back and they reported to Adam Schiff and company what I said on the phone call, and the CIA guy was in that. And then next thing you know, impeachment after impeachment is coming. So I think that Donald Trump, what that probably did is, shall we say, radicalize Donald Trump. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I'll say this, having dealt with and observe the kind of things that go on with our government, I would consider myself a radicalized person. I put it to you like this. If you understand the nature of the United States government, if you ain't radical, something's wrong with you. You know, if you think that you're just going to go along to get along in this country and that you can just support the regular old politicians and it's going to work out for you, that you can not push back, you know what I mean? Then you're naive. You're either radical, and radical's not a negative thing. If you're in an unjust environment, right, then to go along with that is wrong. To just be a person that goes along to get along in an unjust, you should be radical to push back against wrong, you know. So the bottom line is, I think Donald Trump has been radicalized in a way that he understands the nature of the beast that he's dealing with, and he understands. I think all of this is, I'm guessing, subjective, but I think that Donald Trump will now understand that he's got to be very, very wary of who he puts around him, that he's got to watch his back, and that he's going to have to put people around him that he feels will. But one of the things I'll say is this: if he's smart, he'll pick people around that he's had around for a long time. You know what I mean? That's the history of, you bring people that you came to the dance with in a long time. If he's smart, they're less likely to help rub you out. Not saying that they won't. I'm just saying all you can do is play the odds. So I think you're going to see Donald Trump surround himself with people that he's been around with a long time, that he trusts, and go from there. Yeah. I think
all right, I'm going to get to that. I want to get to that in a second. We're here with Garland Nixon. We've got almost 1,000 watching live across all of the platforms right now. If you are watching on YouTube, Garland's YouTube channel link is in the description box below the video, as is the links to all of his other links. So please support his important work. If, like you just said, Trump's eyes are now wide open to the maneuvers of the deep state, doesn't that make him an even bigger target? Won't they be coming to finish the job? Is it like the mafia scene where they try to whack the guy and he's in the hospital on life support and they go in and they finish the job?
Yeah, they put the old pillow over his head when they unplug his machines. You know the game. Well, I think I do believe that Trump understands that. However, let me add this: it's going to be a lot harder now too. You know what I mean? Now that they shot and missed. I mean, if we are, as so many people suspect, it was a deep state act, it's going to be a whole lot harder because the cat's out of the bag, and so. They could risk destabilizing everything at that point. They could really risk losing it all. So I think now they're going to be wary of that. Look, and I got to throw this out there too. Some years ago, it came out, and people can look it up on that the CIA, that intelligence has a heart attack gun. There have been people that have died of diseases, terrible, come down suddenly with cancer and things of that nature, where there was suspicion that, they had said. So the other side of it is, who knows, that somebody could suddenly get sick with an, unforeseen illness. They do those kinds of things. So Donald Trump's got to watch himself. I've watched what I eat. If I look like the king in the old days, right? He might need to get a food taster or something like that. But yeah, I'm with you. It's a dangerous environment for Donald Trump. It is definitely a dangerous environment for Donald Trump. But it's tough for them to make a move on him the second time.
Just look at all the methods they tried to use on Castro.
Exactly.
All right, we've got a question here from Christine Peach. So many TV people saying that Trump needs to be taken out. Is anyone calling for justice about the hate speech about Trump? Before I give that to you, Garland, I watched the videos yesterday of Biden just last week talking about Trump being a target and all this aggressive speech. And then after the assassination attempt, he's saying people need to lower and not be so aggressive, saying these things. Absolute bloody hypocrites. Do you think a lot of these people are responsible for what happened?
Yes. Yeah. There's, what's interesting about this? a year or so ago, 8 months or so, AOC was running around talking, and she came up with a new term, right? I'm sure she didn't come up with it. They came up, the spin masters came up with it. And the term was stochastic terrorism, right? And I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? Stochastic. And they're like, basically what they were saying is, and they were like saying, who was it? Tucker Carlson, whoever the hell, right? And they're like, yes, they're saying things that are inciting people to violence. So stochastic terrorism is if you say something that incites people to violence. I don't think we're going to hear that term anymore from them, because they didn't. If you think about it, Kathy Griffin's running around with a severed head. Yeah, severed head. It's Trump. Oh, that was ketchup. And afterwards, she's like, well, that was ketchup on it. I don't care what was on it. You assassinated him in effigy. They talked about, you had people come on television and say, somebody's going to have to put a bullet in Trump. Now, why is it that we're on YouTube, or I'm on Rumble, all those, whatever, right? And I got to watch it, because if I say the wrong word, I'll get a strike. YouTube will demonetize me, anything like that. But they can go in the mainstream media and say you should put a bullet in the president. Oh, it wouldn't be the first time an actor had killed the president. They can say all these unthinkable, violent things that would get you and I, which they're just waiting to throw us off, whatever the hell anyway, that you and I, if we say anything close to that, they're going to interpret it as violence. We can say, I've had instances where I've said things like, yes, I don't think they should kill anyone. Oh, he used the word kill. We're going to have to, I could say the opposite. We're going to have to demonetize that video. But yes, they've been on saying all of this. They've created an environment that was very dangerous for Donald Trump. So if the deep state wasn't behind it, if in fact it was just a crazy killer that they did or didn't facilitate, they're just as guilty. They are just as guilty, because the things that they've said has created an environment of violence, of anger, and of irrationality for some of their followers, supporters, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I know what you mean regarding the algorithmic strangulation. About 3 years ago, I lost my YouTube channel twice over my Epstein coverage. We had 60 million views on that case, and it was all nuked and wiped off the face of the earth. Anyway, comment here from Torwind. Have you guys seen the woman in the black hat behind Trump who was hiding herself behind a sign to get her phone out to start recording? Seconds before the shots rang out, she didn't even flinch. I have seen that. Have you seen that? Have you noticed any other anomalies in the crowd?
No,
Garland?
but I'll put it like this. You know, if you look through the crowd of thousands, you can pick up all kind of anomalies. I mean, I don't say that there wasn't a big deal behind that, but there were people that were picking up the, oh boy, Trump's getting ready. Oh, he's going to say something. So while those things could indicate something bad, by the same token, as who was it? Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So could it be that she knew something? She was recording something? Possible. But it could be that with that many people, you got thousands of people there. There are people that are like, oh, did you get that? No, I'll record it. Yeah, there's things going on that are organic. So I don't want to say go all through everything and say that proves a point or that doesn't prove a point. I don't know.
Next question is from Baby Gerald. Has anyone figured out where the dead victim and wounded people were seated or standing?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know, because what's interesting is Trump's there and bullets are flying by him. And at first I thought, well, somebody behind him would get hit. You know, like the bullets would be coming at him like that, and you'd see somebody behind him and fall. But the thing about it was, while I saw Trump, I don't know what angle the bullets were coming on. So I don't know. I haven't seen in any video anybody get hit, and the likelihood is they won't show, you know, some poor innocent person getting hit. But I don't know. Remember, the guy's a long way away, and he's shooting at an angle, so we don't know what angle it was going. But I haven't seen that enough that I could really comment on it, you know, comfortably to say, oh, this is what I think.
So here's a comment I concur with, and I'll get your thoughts. That kid being a Republican literally means less than nothing. The CIA could make him a Martian if they wanted to. They wiped all his social media and could create any identity they want.
And not only that, here's the other thing. It does literally mean nothing for this reason. One of the machinations that's been used in the primaries is this. Okay, let's say you want Trump to win or Trump to lose. One of the things the Democrats won't tell you is in 2016, they wanted Trump to win because they thought they could beat him. and they were like pushing their people to help him win. There was a look, for anybody who doesn't know, look something up. It's called the Pied Piper theory. It was Hillary Clinton's plan to say, let's get Donald Trump to win because he's the easiest to beat. That's literally what they did. Anybody can search that. It's out there. The evidence is there. They said it, right? But here's my point. There were a lot of people who were Democrats who would register as Republicans so that during the primary, they could vote as in the Republican primary, and they could one way or another disrupt or affect the Republican primary. So the fact that he was a Republican means absolutely nothing, because he could have been either or for whatever reason. I did read about apparently one of his students, one of his a student that was in school with him, saying they had talked, and the guy said, it was a Hispanic kid, and the kid said, I'm voting for Trump, and apparently he got mad at him and called him stupid, that this happened in the past. I don't think that he was a pro-Trump guy by any stretch of the imagination. I think that he was a Trump-hating kid, and I think he was probably mentally ill. One of the other kids that went to school with him, I saw that interview, said, yeah, he was kind of bullied. He was a little, which doesn't mean anything. It could be he was mentally ill, and yeah, that happened. It could be that that's the kind of person you use. You know what I mean? If you want some plausible deniability, you use a person who's like that to carry out your diabolical deeds. And that way people just say, well, he was mentally ill, rather than, if I'm the deep state and I want to use somebody, I'm not going to use somebody who has like that people can look at their history and look at all that stuff. Use a mentally ill kid, stick them out there, and then you can paint whatever picture you want.
What is the security protocol for an event like this? All the surrounding buildings, aren't they scoped out? And how did the shooter know the building that didn't have any sniper on the top of the roof?
Those things make no sense. Keep in mind, I was in law enforcement, right? I worked with Secret Service. Dick Cheney had a house over in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, right? In this one community that was on the water, and he'd come there on the weekends. And at that time, I was for the Maryland Natural Resources. We were the guys with the police boats, right? Okay. I was the assistant commander of field operations at that time. I was assigned to work with the Secret Service to set up the security plan for Dick Cheney's house when he came there on the weekends. I know how they work. I worked with them, right? I worked with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. This was, way back when, but, because I worked for the agency, and they thought there may be areas around Maryland where there could be terrorism, like nuclear power plants, that kind. So I did that kind of stuff, right? I worked for the governor's office. I work with these people. They send people in weeks ahead of time. They're taking satellite photos. They got drones flying around over every square inch of everything. It's not plausible to argue that they hadn't gone through I'll tell you what we did. We would literally do this. You go, if that place, whatever it was, if they have a website, right? You go to their website and you go through their website and you say, is there something on the website that anybody could use to get information or whatever, right? If you go and the website says, we have 4 buildings and they're located here and the size is this and the heights of the building is this, you say, take that off the website because somebody could utilize that for information. That's how detailed the Secret Service is. And I've worked with that. So to argue that they hadn't looked at this, they hadn't scoped it out, they didn't know. They knew the height of that building, they knew the size of that building, everything you could think about of that building. There's no possible way. So it's not plausible that by happenstance he just happened to climb up to an empty building and nobody knew he was there. Especially when the cops took a picture of him an hour before. How do you wander up to this building with a gun and nobody sees you? A long rifle.
It's preposterous.
These things don't make a lot of sense, do they?
No. Bobby Taylor's wondering whether the report about the SS director dismissing Trump's regular SS and giving him novices for the 13th. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't heard anything about this, but I would say this for the sake of argument. If in fact it was some kind of a deep state operation, they'd do the opposite, wouldn't they? They'd want their people in there. They wouldn't want any young people that didn't know what time it was, that didn't know what to move or how to move, right? So realistically, if they were in an operation, they wouldn't want some greenhorn in there that might run his mouth or do the wrong thing. They'd want the best that they had in there so they would know exactly what to do and when to do it. Not saying, I'm not going after the individual Secret Service agents saying everyone was in on it. I'm just saying it would make more sense to me that they would have experienced people there if the case were that they were in on it. Not saying they were or weren't. I don't want anybody to take that I'm acting like I know something that I don't know.
Yep. So this comment from All Truman Service, Trump saying he doesn't want any war. That's what got JFK in trouble. Do you think the military industrial complex is the biggest prime mover in the deep state? And do you think that is a main issue here for Trump?
Well, I don't see it as the biggest prime mover in the deep state. You know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of like when you look at this monster, it's kind of like a person. I got arms, I got legs, I got feet. All of those things come together to make up what's Garland. Could you say he's got big feet or big hands? Yeah, but feet and hands and all of these things together come together to make Garland, right? So I don't say one of these things is more important than the other. They all work together to do the evil things that they do. I do believe that Donald Trump's failure to go along with this whole U.S. empire thing. We're supposed to run around the world, dominate everybody, tell everybody what to do. Everybody has to listen to us. But we don't have a dime for the people at home. We don't have anything to help the working person at home who's trying to make a living, trying to feed his family. We can't fix the roads. We can't fix the bridges. We can't do anything here for American people. They can suck every dime we have out of the national treasury and hand it out to their corporate friends. They can go to Ukraine and build 46 bio research labs. Bio research labs, right? How many hundreds of millions of dollars did that? And Hunter Biden was involved in that. You know, there was all kind of money laundering going on. So there's so much money laundering going on. There's money going in every which way. So there's no one part of this thing that, you know, I remember, let me say this. I remember a while back when umpteen $1 billion went to Ukraine. And I actually went in online and I found like where you could see where the money was going. You wouldn't believe it. Some of it was going to the CDC. It was going to all kinds of agencies that had nothing to do with foreign policy. You know what it was? They'll be like, yes, we're sending $40 billion to Ukraine and $20 billion to Taiwan and $10 billion to Israel. And when you start looking at that money, nah, it's going all over to the place, to their buddies. It's going to the Center for Disease Control. And they had things like it's going to the State Department for their international diversity program. You know what I mean? Crap like that, right? It's money laundering. They're laundering the money everywhere and everybody's getting a piece of it. So yeah, military industrial complex, they get the big chunk, but everybody else is eating off of it.
So Methil Mayhem, we only have to look at Julian Assange to see how the deep state works. Why do you think Biden gave Assange a pass?
To me, that's an easy one. And because I had talked about it for a while. One of the things that I had been saying on my radio shows in here is this. I said, if I was Assange, at that time, it was kind of obvious. They were just leaving him to die in a British prison, right? Forever. And they were just going to have, you know, hearing after hearing after hearing until he died of old age or whatever. Okay. But I started saying, if I was Assange, I'd say, you know what? I'm waiving my rights. I want to go to the U.S. because they had problems. One of the big problems that they had was they spied on his defense team, which means he can't get a fair trial. I know the government didn't want to see that go to the Supreme Court. Then they had a problem because the hearings started to say, does he get to bring up his First Amendment rights? Is he going to get to make that claim? What started coming out was something that a lot of people like me had argued. If he gets over here, some of the arguments that he has, if they get in front of the Supreme Court, it's going to be hard for the Supreme Court not to find on his behalf and throw this stuff out. I think they were afraid because they started realizing that the things that they had done had created an environment where he couldn't get a fair trial, and that if he got in front of the Supreme Court, he had about 3 or 4 things that was going to be hard for the Supreme Court not to rule in his favor. And imagine that they get him over here and then they lose and he walks. And I think they just like went to the people and said, and you know the game, I've been involved in it before. They go to him and they say, look, okay, you know you're going to walk. I know you're going to walk. But here's what we're going to do. We can drag this thing out for another 2 years, and you're already sick, and God only knows, you know, if you're even going to make it. Or you can just plead guilty to one thing and you can walk now. And I don't blame them. I mean, if you're looking at a couple more years and they kept you in jail for I don't know how long, and they give you an opportunity to walk, you got to, you know, he's got a wife and kids. He had to take that. But I think they knew that they were holding a losing hand. That's why there's no other reason they would have let him go other than they were holding a losing hand.
Yeah, we've campaigned for the release of Julian Assange for years. I've corresponded with him, and thank goodness he's a free man now. All right, so just because he's saying people saw the guy on the roof and the police did not intervene, why did the state police not intervene? There is a video of this.
I don't know. You know, I think those things need to be investigated. I don't know. It's really weird. You know, I tell you what, when I was in law enforcement and when the president came around, and we were a bunch of cops, they take our guns. Literally. I couldn't bring my gun in the area where the president was. They were afraid that one of us may freak out and shoot him. You know what I mean? So, you know, I mean, unless you were assigned, you know, if you're assigned as one of the officers and you're one of the, you know, security personnel on scene, sure. But they are so careful. It's just unfathomable to look at the things that happen. And you know what? If there's one thing, okay, fine. But numerous things happen that make you ask questions like the question that the last person asked, and you don't have an answer to any of them. I would think some of them you would have an answer. So far, every day we're like, we turn on the news or go online and we find something new that's even more weirder. You know what I mean? It's not like, okay, we get one of our questions resolved. We have a new question that's even crazier than the ones we had before.
So we've got 20 minutes left with Garland Nixon. Please put your questions in the chat. We are live and get them in. Last shout. So we've got one here from Towind. I saw a picture of an FBI agent on the roof with a hose spraying off the blood and brain matter and drenching the ladder. When was the last time you saw a cop clean up a crime scene? Weird.
You know, that's interesting because for the most part, you know, again, when I was in law enforcement, I was the chief of the investigations division at one point. And, you know, crime scene preservation is something that I taught. And no, you just don't walk in there with a hose. You know what I mean? I would think if I'm in charge of that, man, I'm going to have forensics all over there. You know what I mean? You got to have forensics all over that roof, searching. Did he leave something on the roof? What happens if you find some blood on the roof somewhere and you dab it and it ain't his? And somebody else was up there with him, and some hair on the roof, and you DNA that, and it ain't his. And you're like, whose hair is this? Somebody else was up there. You know, you find a footprint up there, you find something else up there, and you're like, wow, this is kind of weird. You know, so there's so many, that roof and that crime scene. I would think under these circumstances, you're going to have a forensics team in there, and they're going to go over that thing, you know, with an electron microscope. If I'm in charge of the scene, that's what I do. You're going to tell me that the FBI sent some freaking guy up there with a water hose to hose down the crime scene? Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. It goes against everything I was ever taught and everything that I taught as an I was, again, it's not bragging. I'm just telling people my background. I was a commander of the training division. I taught this crap. And that is a good question. It makes no sense.
Do you think they've learned from Hinckley, Saran, Oswald, that the patsy has to be eliminated immediately these days, not to let the patsy live?
Yeah, that's you know, dead men tell no tales, right? So there's no way that guy could live, because who knows what he might say, you know. So he had to go. And the interesting thing was, apparently they had the scope on him, but they waited until after he shot to take a shot at him. You know what I mean? So yeah, he had to die, but he had to squeeze those shots off before he died, apparently.
Aren't they trained their entire lives, these SS people, to identify and eliminate a threat on sight?
Yes, they are. And not only that, look, they don't take no chances. When you work, they'll tell you, look, you better do everything we tell you to do when you're in this area. because if you do, those guys up there, they're not to differentiate. If you're acting weird, they have been trained, shoot first and ask questions later. So if you've got a VIP in the area, you know, president, secretary of state or something in the area, and they will tell you, I did this for Clinton. I was involved with security for Clinton, for Bush, you know, because I'm an older guy back in the 80s, stuff like that, right? And they'll let you know plain and clear, man, look, if you make a mistake and if you do something we told you not to do, if you go in an area we told you not to go in, you're likely to get shot. So the way of doing things is shoot first, ask questions later. So they see a guy laying there with a gun and they see him through the scope and they're like, asking, should I take a shot? Nah, let's wait and see what happens. Let's see how this thing shakes out before we make that decision. Who said
that? Candace is wondering whether our
Now, one of the things that I found extremely interesting and important in all of this was the reaction of Democrats and liberals and the left, prominent people on the left, who basically unanimously united to proclaim not only that political violence is wrong, but that they were praying for the president and for his speedy recovery, meaning Donald Trump's speedy recovery. Joe Biden said that, Kamala Harris said that, Chuck Schumer said that. Here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the leaders of the Trump is Hitler faction of the Democratic Party, who on the day of the attempted assassination on Saturday, said the following, quote, "There is no place for political violence, including the horrific incident we just witnessed in Pennsylvania. It is absolutely unacceptable and must be denounced in the strongest terms. My heart goes out to all the victims, and I wish the former president a speedy recovery." I wish the former president a speedy recovery, meaning Donald Trump. Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't even take a second look at that. That's what a psychologically healthy person would say and how they would react to a situation of this kind. But the reason it strikes me as so bizarre, and I mean this sincerely, is that the entire left liberal narrative about Donald Trump, since he descended down that escalator in 2015 to announce his candidacy, but especially over the last 4 years, intensifying even more over the last year as the election approaches, as Democrats get more desperate because of the polls showing they're likely to lose to Trump. The narrative about Donald Trump is that he's not just any ordinary political adversary of the kind that, say, Mitt Romney or John McCain or George W. Bush were. And you should go back and look at what Democrats are saying about George W. Bush and Mitt Romney and John McCain. They weren't saying, oh, that's an ordinary adversary at the time. But the idea that Democrats push now is that actually Donald Trump is not just an ordinary adversary. He is a fascist. He intends to implement fascist dictatorship in the United States. That if Trump wins, this will be the last election we ever enjoy as Americans. That Trump intends to create concentration camps where he will put his domestic political enemies and political critics. AOC herself has warned that she believes she may get into one of those camps. Rachel Maddow has said she believes she will go into one of those camps. Joe Scarborough has implied or alluded to the same thing. Joy Behar on The View, when she had Rachel Maddow on, said she thinks she may go to that camp or that Trump may just take The View off the air entirely. They're talking about Trump often explicitly like a figure that is the equivalent of Adolf Hitler. So if you really believe that, if you really believe that Trump is an existential threat to American democracy, a fascist dictator, and a Hitler-type figure, why would you say that you wished him a speedy recovery It's like saying, oh, in 1939, I just learned that there was an assassination attempt against Adolf Hitler, which there was, by an anarchist who hated Hitler. And he was a leftist, more so than an anarchist. And he almost succeeded in murdering Adolf Hitler. He planted a bomb and Hitler was able to leave just before the bomb detonated. And history looks back on him and views him as a hero. And imagine someone in 1940 saying, oh, Hitler just got wounded in a attack. I'm praying for the Führer's speedy recovery. I'm praying for the Nazi leader's family and for his health. And my solidarity that goes out to him and to his Nazi followers. It's not something anybody who was against Hitler would ever say for obvious reasons, nor would they say it after World War II. And yet that has been the narrative of the Democratic Party. And I say that not for some kind of cheap gotcha, but because the maximalist fear-mongering that they have been disseminating about what would happen if Donald Trump got elected again, they've not really explained why he didn't build domestic concentration camps and kill and murder his critics in the first 4 years when he was president. They claim that he will do so now. But if you really believe that, you either stay silent when someone tries to murder him, or you cheer it. You follow your views to their logical conclusion. The day after AOC said she's praying or whatever for his speedy recovery, one day after, she was responding to growing reports, as we're about to show you, that many Democrats in Washington are now saying that they're resigned to a Donald Trump victory, and that not only are they resigned to it, but they can actually live with it because they're willing to say anonymously, but not in public, that Democratic leaders, of course, don't believe that Trump is an existential threat to American democracy, some kind of fascist dictator. This is just the propaganda that's fed to idiot cable hosts and to the horde of Democrats, the very gullible dupes that they want to go vote for them. And they're admitting, we don't really actually think that. And AOC was responding to these reports, and this is what she said, quote, if you're a, quote, senior Democrat that feels this way, you should absolutely retire and make space for true leadership that refuses to resign themselves to fascism. So it's not even one day later, 24 hours later, that she's accusing Donald Trump and his movement of trying to impose fascism in the United States. So if you actually believe that, why a day earlier were you saying, I'm praying for or hoping for his speedy recovery? That really makes no sense. If you really believe that that's true about Donald Trump and what you're saying he's planning on doing, that he doesn't just have bad policies or bad ideologies, that he's actually going to bring fascist dictatorship and a Hitlerian approach to the United States, that he will end American democracy, of course you're not going to say, oh, my heart goes out to the former president. It's not an issue of hypocrisy. What it does is it reveals the fact that these people do not believe what they're saying. Now, just to kind of underscore the point, I want to just make clear how pervasive this narrative has been, that Trump isn't just another adversary, but he's actually Adolf Hitler. Here is Jake Tapper, who gave a little sermon about the importance of turning down the temperature, of making sure that our rhetoric is restrained and sober and peaceful. Here's the kind of thing that he said after on the day of the assassination. You can see the graphic there. We are living in an age of political violence. And here's what Jake Tapper, who's starting to envision himself as like an Edward R. Murrow figure. You can see as the posture, like he was addressing the nation as some kind of Cronkite figure who everyone trusts. And he was here to urge us to tone down the political rhetoric. Listen to what he said.
Including CNN in 2018. Last year, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security warned of a high threat of violence from radicalized individuals, lone offenders, or small group attacks that occur with little warning, and said that the 2024 election cycle will be, quote, a key event for possible violence. officials, voters, and elections-related personnel and infrastructure, including polling places, ballot drop box locations, voter registration sites, campaign events, political party offices, and vote counting sites, unquote. There is something troubling the American soul right now. Too many Americans see those with whom they disagree as the enemy, to be shunned, to be banned, to be ostracized, to be threatened with violence, or even to have that violence carried out.
Okay, so the problem that we face as a nation, says Jake Tapper, is that there are too many people who see their political adversaries as their enemy, as someone to be denounced and condemned and regarded as evil. Those are such beautiful words. I feel so inspired. I feel more peaceful hearing Jake Tapper say that. The problem is that Jake Tapper has been calling Trump or comparing Trump or equating Trump to Adolf Hitler and to the Nazi movement for many years. This is what surfaced when Jake Tapper was chosen to moderate the first presidential debate. And here is Jack Prosovich, who created a kind of compilation of just some of the times when that very same Jake Tapper, who was sermonizing the public about the evils and dangers of demonizing our political enemies, all the times that this neutral, objective, nonpartisan journalist went on to CNN airwaves. Thankfully, nobody was listening because it's CNN, but still. And he repeatedly and in many different contexts suggested that Trump was the equivalent of Adolf Hitler.
The dehumanizing rhetoric of Adolf Hitler is once again alive and well on a national political stage. This time, of course, in the United States. Donald Trump, a couple times over the weekend, referred to immigrants from South America, Africa, and Asia. He did not mention Europe, South America, Africa, and Asia, as, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, which it's not hyperbole. That does very directly echo Adolf Hitler's language before World War II. To open up a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf, you would find the Nazi leader describing the mixing of non-Germans with Germans as poisoning. There's really no other way to say it. Donald Trump's language mirrors this directly.
All right, so if you spend years going on the air and suggesting that the former president and the current frontrunner for the presidency, representing a party that is the opposite of your own, is the equivalent of Adolf Hitler, don't come with a sermon after that person that you've been claiming is Adolf Hitler ends up being the target of assassination, telling people that their fault, the great evil of others in the United States, is that they use reckless rhetoric and treat their political opponents not as adversaries to be argued with or debated with or defeated at the ballot box with, but as people who should be demonized, as people who are pure evil. Just last week, the liberal outlet, The New Republic, published a cover story. And on that cover, there you see Donald Trump compared in every single conceivable way to Adolf Hitler, including, as you may not be able to see, but right there is the Hitler mustache. And then this here is the font that was used by the Nazi Party and much of their propaganda. And it's called American Fascism, what it would look like. And they convened a panel of some of the world's most renowned and respected scholars on fascism, such as Brian Stelter and Jason Stanley and a bunch of other Democratic operatives. And obviously the whole point of this is to suggest that Donald Trump is the equivalent of Adolf Hitler. And this has been the narrative, not only of Democrats, but also of the corporate media for a long time. We have a short compilation of just some of the times where this has been done in the very recent past.
Arrangement, terror, and horror.
And just one more quote so people know exactly what Carl and Dan are talking about here. General Milley on the big lie and what Trump was saying about the election, the lies. He says, this is a Reichstag moment, Milley told aides, the gospel of the Fuhrer. The Reichstag moment refers to Adolf Hitler using the burning of the German parliament basically to seize all power in Germany, suspend habeas corpus, suspend civil rights, a coup. more or less, of sorts there.
Point of the book is that these things really happened over and over again, and that intelligent people, no less intelligent than us, experienced them and left a record for us to learn from. So what I'm trying to do in the book is to help us to learn from that record, so we don't have events like Germany in 1933 or Czechoslovakia in 1948. Just saying Hitler's not like Trump, or Trump is not like Hitler, isn't going to save us. Learning from the past, though, could.
So that's the Yale professor Timothy Snyder, who's been going around
A
saying
lot
this
of people
forever.
have tried to draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler, and the use of the terminology like vermin, and the drive that those men had towards autocracy and dictatorship. The difference, though, I think makes Donald Trump even more dangerous, and that is he has no philosophy he believes in. He is not trying to expand.
What, in your view, would happen if he were to be reelected? Oh, I can't even think that, because I think it would be the end of our country as we know it. You know, when I was Secretary of State, I used to talk about one and done. And what I meant by that is that people would get legitimately elected, and then they would try to do away with elections and do away with opposition and do away with a free press. And you could see it in countries where, well, Hitler was duly elected. That's right. Right? And so all of a sudden, somebody with those tendencies, those dictatorial, authoritarian tendencies, would be like, oh, okay, we're going to shut this down. We're going to throw these people in jail. And they didn't usually telegraph that. Trump is telling us what he intends to do. We need to listen to Take him at his word. The man means to throw people in jail who disagree with him, shut down legitimate press outlets, do what he can to literally undermine the rule of law and our country's values.
Okay, so I could literally show you many, many more minutes of that. In fact, this is about a third of the video compilation that we had. Part of the irony here is what Hillary Clinton was warning that Trump would do: imprison his political opponents, shut down dissent. Obviously, it was what the Democratic Party has done. They've done everything they could to imprison Donald Trump. They even have explicitly said that what's most urgent about the goal of imprisoning Trump is that it be done before the vote start for the 2024 election, because they look at polling data and see that it's one of their only chances to actually soften Trump's support is if they are able to convict him and imprison him before the election. They have implemented a systemic regime of censorship where they're able to coerce big tech companies to remove dissent online, and all other kinds of weaponization of the legal system against their political opponents. But if you go around saying that Trump is Hitler, that he's going to end American democracy, then the minute you start saying, oh, my heart goes out to Donald Trump, this should never have happened, it obviously means that you don't believe anything that you've said. Now, I guess we can have one more clip here. This is from Liz Cheney.
Frauds.
Who, by the way, whose father did more than any individual in the last 50 years to actually reduce any limitations on the office of the presidency, to turn it into a monarchy through his theory of going back all the way to the Iran-Contra scandal in the 1980s, that presidents are unbound by any limits of any kind in exercising their duties, including laws enacted by the Congress that they're permitted to violate. The reason I began writing about politics is because of these radical executive theories, executive power theories being implemented by Liz Cheney's dad as she cheered. She's such a strange figure to be warning of the authoritarianism of the presidency that Trump intends to implement, given how she comes from a family whose entire career has been about doing nothing but. But of course, because of these warnings of Donald Trump, she's considered a hero in liberal circles, some kind of wise statesperson by corporate media, even though she was booted out of office by a record 37 points by her own voters in her own primary. She went on CBS morning show with John Dickerson. I believe this is Face the Nation in December of 2023. And here's the warning she issued about Trump.
You say Donald Trump, if he is reelected, it will be the end of the republic. What do you mean?
He's told us what he will do. It's very easy to see the steps that he will take. People who say, well, if he's elected, it's not that dangerous because we have all of these checks and balances. don't fully understand the extent to which the Republicans in Congress today have been co-opted. One of the things that we see happening today is a sort of a sleepwalking into dictatorship in the United States.
Now, I just want to say one thing, that I am not a person who has ever liked or believed in this attempt to suggest that when somebody goes and carries out violence against a political figure or anyone else, that we should blame whoever we say expressed ideas that might have inspired the attacker, the violent shooter, to go and do it. Because, and I've devoted many shows to this, anytime you express a political view, it's possible that someone who hears you might go and carry out violence. If you say that you think abortion is murder, someone might hear you and go and kill an abortion doctor. If you say you think the CIA is evil and abuses its power against American citizens, or the NSA is spying on us illegally, someone might go attack the CIA and the NSA. Any political view that you ever express might end up actually inspiring people to go and carry out violence. So I don't think that the fact that Democrats have been running around accusing Trump of being Hitler means they're responsible for the assassination attempt. I don't like that theory when it's used against the right, as it always is, and I don't like it when it's used to support the right. But the reality is that this is the theory that Democrats and liberals have been perpetrating for a long time. They constantly blame their political enemies, conservatives, for being responsible for and even having blood on their hand whenever some maniac goes and kills a bunch of people. I actually wrote about exactly this in 2021 at 2022 rather, and this the title of that article was "The Demented and Selective Game of Instantly Blaming Political Opponents for Mass Shootings." And this was in the context of a racist white supremacist had gone and purposely attacked a grocery store in Buffalo, where that was situated in an overwhelmingly African-American community. And he murdered 10 people. He left a manifesto about the white replacement theory, and the entire media immediately said that Tucker Carlson was to blame for that murder, that he has that blood on his hands. In fact, so much so that anytime Twitter discussed it, as you see there, the name Tucker Carlson was trending with that Buffalo attack. There was really an overwhelming effort to blame Tucker Carlson for that attack, claiming that his rhetoric against non-white people, which, by the way, doesn't exist. Tucker Carlson has never railed against non-white Americans. He believes that all Americans, regardless of race, have the same rights, and believes that uncontrolled immigration is a threat to Americans of all races, especially the working class of all races. So it was a false attempt to characterize his views, but even if it were the case that he was saying those things, that still wouldn't make him morally or ethically or legally responsible for people who hear him and go and carry out violence in his name, since he himself is not advocating violence. Obviously, I said the same thing about Donald Trump's speech on January 6th, when actually not only did he not encourage people to use violence, he explicitly said march down to the Capitol and peacefully protest. One of the most bizarre cases was when the Arizona Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords was shot and almost killed in the head by a person who turned out not even to be politically motivated, but basically who was just an insane person. The corporate media overwhelmingly said that Sarah Palin was to blame by virtue of the fact that she had put out an ad identifying vulnerable districts where Democratic incumbents were that she believed should be turned red in the midterm election. And one of those districts where she put this crosshairs image to say these are the places we want to target. Here you see it's at the top, we diagnose the problem, help us prescribe the solution. And then at the bottom right here, it says, click here for a list of the candidates. And here in Arizona was Gabby Giffords' district because it was a swing district. And the entire media decided that she was somehow encouraging people to go and carry out murder in these districts. And therefore, when Gabrielle Giffords was shot, Sarah Palin was to blame. Here you see from ABC News, Sarah Palin's, quote, crosshair ads dominates the Gabrielle Giffords debate. And the article says, quote, in the stunned aftermath of the Tucson massacre, Sarah Palin has found herself in the crosshairs of the ensuing political debate, with opponents suggesting she may have fueled the gunman's rage. And her supporters saying it is, quote, grotesque to blame her and to politicize the tragedy. Crosshairs is a political phrase that emerged from Palin's Political Action Committee, Sarah PAC, that targeted congressional districts for the Tea Party campaign in the last election, including the district of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. Although Palin later denied she meant the graphic over the districts look like a gun site, it is part of the hunting lexicon that critics say she prefers. So obviously, if Tucker Carlson is responsible for the Buffalo massacre of Black people with his rhetoric, and Sarah Palin was guilty of the attack on Gabrielle Giffords, and Donald Trump was responsible for the violence on January 6th, and running around calling Donald Trump a Nazi and insisting, trying to convince people that he will end American democracy and put critics in camps and end free press and end the American democracy, obviously has the potential, by the same theory, which I do not support, but if you're going to use it, Democrats have to be guilty for an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. Now, the Wall Street Journal pointed out that Biden's rhetoric in recent days has escalated. This is on July 14th, the day of the shooting, and they reported, quote, it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. In the bullseye, Biden said in a July 8th call with donors to the campaign. The quote was sent around by the Biden campaign to journalists after the call, a sign that the Biden team viewed the comment as part of their message rather than just a gaffe. So they accuse Sarah Palin of being guilty of, responsible for the attack on Gabrielle Giffords because she used a hunting target, a crosshair, to identify vulnerable districts. Yet here's Joe Biden, shortly before the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, urging that a bullseye be placed on him. Now, he did an interview today as part of his ongoing campaign to prove that he's not a senile old man suffering from dementia with the NBC anchor Lester Holt. And Holt, to his credit, I guess, pressed Biden on this, saying, just like Republicans have been accused of being guilty for inciting violence with their rhetoric, what about your rhetoric? And listen to what Biden said. I mean, if you think this helps in any way with the idea that somehow he's proven that he's not demented, I think this video suggests the opposite. But listen to the substance of how he defends himself.
You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate the
I didn't say
word
crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was there's very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
Now, nobody asked him about the word crosshairs. The reason that's in his brain is because that was the thing used to accuse Sarah Palin of being guilty for inciting the attempted assassination of Gabrielle Giffords. So he's answering a question that no one's asking, but then he kind of admitted, oh, it was a mistake to say I want to put a bullseye on Trump. So Democrats are so confused about what to say, and this is all going to get more desperate as we start seeing polls in the aftermath of the assassination attempt on Trump, the way in which he reacted, the obvious reality that everyone knows that Democrats have been running around for a year or more calling him Adolf Hitler, and in the most incendiary way, accusing him of planning to do the worst things possible to the country. Rhetoric that if you could ever accuse someone of inciting violence would be this kind of rhetoric. And just to give you a little taste of how desperate Democrats are, here is polling numbers that came out today from the YouGov polling that is considered one of the best polling. In fact, it has an A+ rating in terms of its predictive accuracy over past elections. And these are general election polling numbers in the key swing states. And there you see Donald Trump is leading every single swing state by a fairly significant margin, including states that Joe Biden won in 2020, including Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I believe Trump won every single one of Biden won every single one of these states in 2020. This is from July 12th, not July 14th. Well, the poll was released today, but the polling was done on July 12th, which was prior to the attempted assassination of Trump. But here you see Trump with a significant lead over Biden in every single one of the swing states, including every one of which Joe Biden won in 2020. So this is why Democrats are so desperate. They obviously can't say what they should be saying if they really believe what they were saying about Trump, which is, yeah, we don't mind that he was attacked, or we don't condone violence, but given that he's basically Adolf Hitler, it's to be expected. Now, you probably have seen that a lot of people, including some top Democratic strategists and funders, were running around suggesting that the attack was staged, and even the corporate media has had to start acknowledging that Democrats are as deranged and unhinged and drowning in conspiracy theories as the worst elements of QAnon or whoever they like to blame for that. And that shouldn't be a surprise, given that Democrats accused Donald Trump of clandestinely conspiring with the Kremlin to hack DNC emails in 2016, claimed in 2020 that the reporting based on the Hunter Biden attack was Russian disinformation. Of course, they're drowning in conspiracy theories. It's pretty much all that they do. But it's been so extreme with leading Democrats, such as Reid Hoffman, the billionaire mega donor to the DNC, had his top advisor encourage journalists to believe that either the shooting was staged and fake, and even he said it might be likely that Putin was involved, given that this is the sort of thing that the Russians do. This is the level of where they're at. That was reported by Semaphore. You can see the article on the screen. Top Democratic strategists pushed reporters to consider, quote, a staged shooting. So there's a lot of that going on. But I think the, again, most important point here is the fact that Democrats are actually coming to terms with the fact that Trump is almost certain to win. And the reason they're saying, look, we have to accept it, and we can accept it, is because, of course, we don't really believe all the things we've been saying about him over the last year, that he's Hitler, that he's going to end democracy. The whole narrative has been both dangerous, but also fraudulent. Just a desperate attempt to know that they can only try and win the election, not by defending Joe Biden or exciting people about Joe Biden, but scaring people into believing that Trump, who was just the president from 2016 to 2020, is actually a Hitlerian fascist. Here from Axios on July 14th, which was yesterday, the Trump rally shooting upends the Democrats' Biden crisis. Quote, a senior House Democrat suggested the post-shooting atmosphere in the party is too, quote, chaotic for internal battles over leadership. Most lawmakers who spoke to Axios said it is too early to say whether the cessation intentions will last until the DNC next month, but the second senior House Democrat offered one reason for why it might. Quote, we've all resigned ourselves to a Trump presidency. So they're basically saying that we've given up on the attempt to oust Joe Biden, even though all polls show he's highly likely to lose, and that was before the attempted assassination. And they're starting to say we've resigned ourselves to it. You wouldn't resign yourself to it if you really believe Trump is Adolf Hitler. But of course, Democrats are now admitting that they don't really believe that at all. Here in the Bangor Daily News, Congressman Jared Golden, the Democratic from Maine, writing in the Maine newspaper, on July 2nd, he wrote this. The headline there is, Donald Trump is going to win the election and democracy will be just fine. This was after the debate. This is what Congressman Golden said, quote, Biden's poor performance in the debate was not a surprise. It also didn't rattle me as it has others because the outcome of this election has been clear to me for months. While I don't plan to vote for him, Donald Trump is going to win, and I'm okay with that. And then he goes on to say that the idea that Trump is sort of grave threat to democracy is lunacy, that of course American democracy is going to be fine with Donald Trump as president, as it was the first time around. And there are a lot of Democrats apparently saying that in Washington. Just most of them are too cowardly to say it in public because they know the Democratic base will turn on them if they admit that Trump's not Hitler. Here is a tweet from Tim Miller, who used to work for Jeb Bush, was a Republican operative, one of those people who converted into a never Trump fanatic and now is basically a Democratic Party propagandist. He spoke with Ezra Klein, the New York Times columnist, who's also a partisan loyalist. And he says, here's the galling exchange with Ezra Klein about his conversations with top Democrats who are resigned to Trump. And then here you see some of the things that Ezra Klein is saying, which he says, people are weighing this set of things, like it would be quite unpleasant for me personally to come out against the president, weighing what will happen if Donald Trump wins and saying in a reveal preference way, I can live with Donald Trump. And I've had people say that to me off the record. And then Tim Miller says, really? I mean, he's shocked. He lives in that never Trump world where Donald Trump is Hitler and is going to destroy American democracy. He's shocked the top Democrats are resigned to Hitler being elected come November and then inaugurated in January. And so he says, really? And then Ezra Klein says, I've had top Democrats say to me basically something like, I don't know why all these Democrats think Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy and are acting the way they are. But the reason I'm acting the way I am, meaning being resigned to Trump's victory, is because I don't think that. And then Tim Miller gets very agitated, to put it mildly, very sad, very confused. And he says, who the F is that? Out your sources, Ezra. That's crazy. It's maddening. But that's the reality, is Democrats are finally realizing that they can't go around calling Trump Hitler any longer, that he's going to destroy American democracy, especially after this assassination attempt. It wasn't working in the polls. There's no way to get Joe Biden out. And so Democrats are now simply comfortable with the fact that Trump is almost certain to win. All of this lays bare the utterly fraudulent nature of the main narrative Democrats have been trying to push to scare the American population in a not normal way for politics, of fear-mongering is done, but to believe that they're about to be living under a Nazi dictator, literally, to the point where magazines and leading Democratic officials and pundits are constantly comparing Trump to Hitler. And yet, all of this, the fact that they're resigned to losing to him, that they know they can't really do anything to stop it, that they're praying for him and his speedy recovery, are all things that show you that, other than a few fanatics, the vast majority of Democratic leaders and obviously American voters do not remotely believe that, because they know that it's a fictitious fairy tale by an increasingly desperate political party eager to stay in power.
That either you've got the Keystone Cops operating as your secret service, or they were in on the crime.
Yeah, I definitely believe this was an inside job. I mean, you have to look at this not just at the microscopic level of what took place that day, But you have to look at this in the span of what's happened to Donald Trump ever since he came down the escalator and announced he was running for president. From the political witch hunt of Russiagate to the attacks on him regarding holding up funding for Ukraine, to now the legal battle that has ensued over payments to Stormy Daniels and not showing that on his taxes. They've put him in prison, essentially. I mean, it's a crazy world we're living in, and they thought that all of this could stop him. It hasn't, and that's why they're now trying to kill him. I saw a news headline this morning. I don't know if you
They're trying
caught
to terminate him with extreme prejudice. I mean, it's not as if they haven't done it before, Jackson.
Yes, I saw a news headline this morning. I'm not sure if you saw it, but actually the photo of the shooter that was taken from an aerial shot above was actually taken 30 minutes before he fired his bullets on that very day. So the Secret Service was well aware of this individual. He was selected as some suspect character on the scene. There was security officials, I think it was the police officials that were inside the building that he actually climbed on top of. People knew his name. They were calling his name right before the shooting took place. There's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And of course, cui bono, who benefits? Well, the opposition leader in Ukraine, Medvedchuk, he came out and said that, of course, Zelensky, the neo-Nazi, would benefit immensely from taking out Donald Trump. And he thinks that Ukraine may have been behind this, or Ukrainian allied centers of power.
Well, I think the Democrats are desperate to avoid a Trump presidency precisely because of the corrupt nature of their relationship with the regime and the previous regime in Ukraine. So it's hard to know where one set of interests ends and the other set of interests begins. But the shooter, let's call him the shooter, I doubt he was the shooter, but that shooter walked a mile carrying a ladder, an assault rifle, 50 rounds of ammunition, for 1 mile, went inside the perimeter to this building, put the ladder up against the wall, climbed up it, and lay there for, as you've just told us, 30 minutes with an assault rifle before anyone even attempted to target him. And he fired 5 shots from that rifle before the Secret Service opened fire on him. Now, there are all kinds of questions that arise from that. What were the police officials doing inside that building? Playing cards? Were they not even watching that nobody came to climb up on top of the building? What was their purpose of being inside that building? And didn't they hear someone on the roof? What were they, partying? And then there's the issue of this water tower, because there is audio of bullets traveling 475 the one, I think it was 500 or 400 yards from the top of the roof, the shooter that was killed. But the water tower was farther away. And there's audio which shows that some of these bullets were fired from farther away than the bullets fired from that roof. And then there's the excuse that there was nobody on the roof because it had a slope. So Secret Service guys can't operate on a sloping roof. Talk to all that, Jackson.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that the police officers inside the building where the shooter A was on top of, they actually saw him climb up on the top of the building. They said we saw him climb up and then we lost sight of him. I don't know where they thought he could have gone since he was clearly climbing to the top of their roof, but I guess we'll leave that to the investigations. And then you bring up a very important point with the water tower. There also is video showing that some of the bystanders in the crowd, directly the moment that the bullets began to fire, there appeared to be bullets coming from another direction And you can actually see one of the projectiles hit the railing of the stands right behind some of these bystanders the very second that this all began. Unfortunately, for those who are trying to push the narrative that it was only one shooter, those bullets were coming from a different direction. If they were bullets, it looked like some sort of projectile to me. Clearly, the bystanders jumped when it happened, and they jumped in the direction that would have protected them from where these bullets were coming from. But again, no one in the press is actually doing any serious investigations into this. We also saw this morning that the shooter A, the one that is being blamed for all of this, he had a transmitter device and a cell phone that was right beside him on the roof of the building as he was carrying out this attack, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it definitely also draws some questions from me. And if I was a journalist at the New York Times, I'd want to look into it. And I'd want to see what this kid was talking about and who he was talking to, whether he was talking to potentially other shooters. And lastly, this is the weirdest part of all. Just yesterday, Dan Bongino, who's a very popular, political commentator, former Fox News host, he now has the biggest show on Rumble. He did a conversation with Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr. at the Republican National Convention. And he and Tucker Carlson both confirmed that there is actually a testimony coming from an unimpeachable source within the deep state of Washington, D.C., who said that the director of the Secret Service was told to stay quiet about what went on this very day during the attempted assassination if he wants to keep his job. And he was told that by the Department of Homeland Security Director Mayorkas. So make of all of that what you will. I think it's extremely suspicious.
Let's talk about the convention now. Seems to have been a bit of a triumph to me. The Teamsters, forever and a day, Democratic Party institution, were present at the RNC. The anti-corporate speeches that I heard would have been welcome at a conference featuring you and me. The anti-war, anti-Ukraine war, at least, rhetoric that is going around was greatly cheering. And the appointment of Vance is, I think, a signal that we're not going to war with Russia over Ukraine, unless it starts before November. But we may well go to war with Iran if we believe the previous pronouncements of Vance. Tell us more about him.
Well, you're 100% correct about the Teamsters president speaking at the Republican National Convention. First time that a Teamsters president has addressed the RNC in their over 120 years of existence. So that was a huge deal. And his speech was amazing. I'd like to highlight the quote from his speech where he said that the elite have no party, the elite have no country. And I think that sums it up as to why he's open and willing to speak to any candidate, any political party, because that's the truth. You're going to find people from both political parties right now, actually, probably more so even in the Republican Party. You'll find more people who are going to stand with labor. And those people are few and far between. It's in no way, shape, or form the vast majority of candidates in the Republican Party. But there are some, and that's why they're open to speaking with the Republicans. I've long since predicted that this was going to happen, that labor was going to move closer to the Republican Party, or maybe won't endorse the presidential candidate in the race for the president. We'll see what happens. I think they're not going to endorse a candidate, which would be a massive move from the Teamsters Union, who has hundreds of thousands of labor employees. So that would be really big. You bring up J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is a guy who, yes, seems as though he doesn't want to go to war against Russia, but he has a logic fail, right? He says, I don't want to arm Ukraine to go to war with Russia, but I want to arm Taiwan to go to war against China, and I want to arm Israel more to go to war against Iran. I mean, the first thing this guy says at the RNC after he's selected to be the next vice president of the United States, he's not talking about saving America, homelessness in this country, infrastructure development. He said, if we really want to go after Iran, we can't do these small, tiny little bombing runs on Iran. We have to hit them hard. I mean, this guy's insane, but he's controlled by big money to interests that are trying to turn this anti-Russia sentiment in America into an anti-China and anti-Iran sentiment. It's even more foolish, I'd argue, than anti-Russian politics in the U.S., considering China has a standing army of 2.14 million active duty service members, and geographically, it's far less of a strategic point for the United States to attack. I mean, we'll send our warships over to the Taiwan Strait, they'll get blown up, and that'll be that. We already tried to send our warships to Yemen, and the Houthis were able to kill our Navy SEALs and blow up some of our ships. So I don't think we're going to perform any better against China. But hopefully Trump finds reason and logic to win at the end of the day. He's not someone who's particularly hawkish on China. So I have my fingers crossed, but I'm not particularly hopeful about the direction that this new White House will head in.
And where does all this leave Crazy Joe? The videos that are coming out fast and furious now show that he's completely lost his mind. It is a serious case of elder abuse. The party and his family and his key advisor, the virtuous Hunter Biden, are subjecting their father, husband to cruel and unusual punishment. But isn't it now the case that Trump is so nailed on to be the winner in November that nobody else would want to be the candidate, swept away in a red tsunami?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I saw today a great quote. The bullet that was fired a few days ago, it hit Donald Trump, but it killed the Biden campaign. And that's where we're at now. I mean, all you have to do is look at what happened to Ronald Reagan when, after he survived an assassination attempt, you know, he was a relatively popular president. Of course, I have huge problems with him personally, but he, after he survived an assassination attempt, he won almost every single state in the union. So Donald Trump, I think, is going to have, all but one. Donald Trump's going to have a blowout victory. And Joe Biden will be delegated to the retirement home. If he's lucky, if he's not lucky, maybe he'll see some time in prison, although I think he might be too old for that. I think they'll save the prison sentence for Hunter Biden.
So the struggle now turns to what you might call the coming struggle for Donald Trump. Will he follow some of his populist instincts, both in domestic policy and in foreign policy, or will, like he did the last time, he surround himself by Pompeos and Boltons and all the worst creatures of the swamp?
Well, in DC, in the Republican world, I think there's three layers of characters that Trump could associate himself with. He could associate himself with the worst of the worst, which are the Boltons and the Pompeos. He could associate himself with the second worst off people, J.D. Vance and his clique of people, Vivek Ramaswamy, Peter Thiel, all these characters. And then the best clique of people he could surround himself with are individuals like Colonel Douglas McGregor, and I think Tulsi has some big problems on Israel and Gaza, but she's stellar on Syria, she's stellar on Iran, she's stellar on Russia. So I think we'll have to see what happens with the cabinet picks, with who he selects as, Secretary of Defense and the State Department in particular, because right now the selection of J.D. Vance isn't making me feel great. But what I will say is, as a final point on this, John Bolton was in the Trump administration for quite some time. And eventually Trump got rid of these horrendous figures and replaced them with people like Colonel Douglas McGregor at the very end of his administration. But John Bolton was trying to get Trump to go to war with China. He kept talking about these plans for color revolutions in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, in Tibet, and in Taiwan. And Donald Trump actually told John Bolton, Bolton admitted this, he said, John, I don't want to ever hear from you again anything regarding Tibet, Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Xinjiang. And then he fired John Bolton. So I think Trump is actually a bit smarter than we give him credit for. I hope that he's not duped, manipulated, or, with full sincerity, I hope he doesn't do anything that's going to be, wrong in the coming presidency. But again, I don't really have a whole lot of hope. I think he's a wild card, and I think there's a 70% chance that we're going to get some pretty awful foreign policy out of him. But that's better than most politicians in D.C.
But, even a stopped clock is right twice a day. The broken clock of Joe Biden isn't ever right. Jackson Hinkle, as always.
Go figure. Follow me.